of this event. It is one of the major events that we partner very successfully with the city of Fort Worth in running, and we are proud to make this a destination event as well as nationally recognized, internationally recognized race for over 28,000 runners on a normal year. So thank you so much for having us.
So just to give you a little history, the Cowtown started in 1979 with an ice storm. And we held the race, and we had 189 total finishers in 1979. 44 years later, we are praying that we don't have rain this year, or snow, or ice. We did have ice in 2015, and that was the year that we had the most runners registered ever of 28,000. And of course, we had to cancel half of that event. So that is a little bit of the history there. And then we have some other things. We added a 5K in 1998 because we had a lot of school children participating, but they were running a 10K. For those of you who don't know, a 10K is 6.1 miles or 6.2 miles, a little too long for the kiddos. So we added a 5K in 1998. Immediately that next year, we had to split the 5K because we had so many children participate that they took over the 5K. So now we have an adults 5K and a kids 5K. We were awarded the recognition of being the largest race in the state of Texas back in the mid-2000s, and then in 2017, we became the largest multi-event in North Texas, and we have stayed that ever since 2017. We are larger than the Dallas Marathon, we're larger than the Austin Marathon. The only one that sometimes beats us out is Houston, so we kind of go back and forth between that. In 2020, our race happened 2 weeks prior to the shutdown of because of COVID, and it got lost in the news, but we were voted the favorite marathon in the United States for the 2020 race. We beat Boston, we beat Chicago, we beat New York as the runners voted and chose us as the favorite event in 2020, and we're very proud of that. We're known across the United States and all across the world. In 2020, we had 17 foreign countries participate, and every state in the United States came in. So we're a very large impact to this city. We bring in $10.4 million of economic impact just for the 3 days that it's taking place. In a normal year, we have 124 schools participate, over 300 corporate and open teams, and the most importantly is we give back to the community through our CAF program, Children's Activities for Life and Fitness. We normally give about 5,500 free pairs of shoes, socks, and entry fees to children in need in North Texas every year. This year, we're giving approximately 4,000 pairs of shoes, socks, and entries to races. And normally, we have about 80,000 visitors visiting our expo that takes place on the Friday and Saturday prior to the race. This year, we anticipate about 50 to 60,000. It's such an important endeavor we're doing when we put this race on, because all of the proceeds go to pay for all those shoes and socks and entry fees for the children. After we distribute the rest of the shoes this year in 2022, we will have given over 50,000 pairs of shoes and socks to children in the past 13 years. And these are children that have never had a new pair of shoes in their life, that are wearing shoes that are 2 sizes too small. We deliver the shoes to their schools and we fit them, and we sit there and wait for their little toes to uncurl because the shoes they're currently wearing are too small. So it's just huge what we're doing, and we're teaching children that running can be fun, and it's an activity they can always do, and they can take it through their lifetime. So that's our beliefs. We believe it's never too late to start a healthier lifestyle regardless of age, size, or background, and we believe a fit and active child will adopt healthy lifelong habits and take it through their entire lifetime. And the community is the key. That's what makes this race happen. The city support makes this race happen. We could not do it with all the support that we have from the Parks Department, the Special Events Department, police, fire, EMS. Y'all help us make this event such a success and make it be the one that's voted to be the favorite in the United States. We want to show you a video that tells the story of our CAF program better than the way I can speak to it, so I believe that's coming up. Oh, this is the other thing. We don't just have the Cowtown. Mm-hmm. We have weekly social runs. Every Thursday, we have social runs taking place at our Cowtown office where they run along the trails. We put on a fundraiser that will happen the end of April this year, the Fête en Blanc, to raise money for those shoes. We put on a CAF run normally in October. We've had to cancel it the last 2 years because of COVID, but it will be back in 2022. And then we do a summer camp for youth in need and then just youth that wants to participate. It's always been just a running camp where they come for half a day and they learn everything about getting fit and active and running and nutrition. This year we've expanded it and we've partnered with the Tarrant Area Food Bank. It's a full-day program. They will learn about running the half of the day in the morning, and then the afternoon they'll go over to Tarrant Area Food Bank. They'll work in the gardens. They'll volunteer in the volunteer center, and they'll learn about the importance of nutrition and how nutrition plays a part as they're running and exercising. And then we also do virtual runs that take place year-round, and truly the virtual runs are what kept us afloat in 2021 due to COVID. And we had more virtual runs than any race in the United States. I actually went to Florida and presented on it to a race directors conference, and we were the only one that did as many as we did. But it truly is what helped us stay alive during the shutdown.
We're really excited to get back in person. You're all invited. You have all been given a packet with credentials so that you are truly welcome on Saturday or Sunday to witness the race. We'll take you on a VIP tour. Just really excited about having it back on its regular weekend in Fort Worth.
And this year, the races, everything is coming back except for the kids' race. We can't social distance 8,000 children. So what we're doing with the kiddos is the same thing we did in 2021, and we actually go to their schools, put on pop-up runs at their schools, on their school grounds, so that they're still running, but they're still getting their socks and their shoes. We've also partnered with the Botanical Gardens, so several of the Fort Worth ISD schools are actually going to go to the gardens and run through the gardens instead of at their schools. And we will start those the week after Cowtown, and we'll do all those pop-up runs. We've got 85 schools. We'll do individual school pop-up runs for March, April, and May, so that the kids are still a part of the event. They just won't be there on race day. So we'll be 8,000 less people on race weekend, but it'll also be less chaotic because you won't have 8,000 children there. But this is the video we'd like to show you. Oh,
Okay.
you'll do it? Perfect. And do you have sound?
I like running, it's fun and it's athletic.
Every year, thousands of kids get a little healthier and a little stronger. They learn how to get fit with better nutrition, better exercise, and better equipment, all thanks to a program you may never have heard of. It's called CAF.
CAF stands for Children's Activities
for life.
And fitness. Children's Activities for Life and Fitness.
The CAF program is a program to promote physical fitness and enrichment and nutrition in a child's life so that they can make it a lifetime goal.
It really encourages the students to, be fit for life.
CAF is organized by the Cowtown Running Organization and offered through schools to any kids who want to participate. The program includes the Cowtown Kids 5K Run, but it's more than a race. It's teachers, parents, nutritionists, and sponsors helping kids embark on a healthier life.
Well, back in about 1986, they started a program so that students that were in schools could participate running. And it wasn't really the CAF program then. It was more the Adopt a School program where sponsors could adopt a school and help pay for the children to run. And I got sponsors to come in to help pay for the children. And it kind of developed more into the CAF program later on. And then about 3 years into it, we noticed that the kids were running in hiking boots and flat shoes with no support and flip-flops. So we decided we need to do more. And that's when we introduced giving the children shoes.
When you deliver brand new shoes, a pair of brand new running shoes to students who've never had a pair before, you can't imagine the smile that is. You're giving them an opportunity, giving them equipment that provides them the chance of a lifetime.
We think it's just a pair of shoes, but it's not just a pair of shoes. We're giving them an extra, opportunity at life and, just to be encouraged and participate with our schools. So.
This year, the CAF program will be giving away 5,000 new running shoes to the students who are participating.
We need corporate sponsors because it's such an expensive endeavor what we're trying to do to get these kids fit and get these kids outside and away from the screen for a little bit and exercising. And these sponsors are what make it happen. Without them, we couldn't purchase the shoes. We have to pay for part of their entry fee, and that's an expensive endeavor, and then provide them with their food.
The more students we can get involved in it today will hopefully, carry on down the line.
This is our youth. We need to invest in them and enhance their lifestyles.
We practice twice a week, and I have been able to run with the kids at least once a week. And it's just wonderful to see how just excited they are about practicing.
It's just not going to practice, and it's just not hitting the miles. You can't do those miles if you don't eat right or you don't have enough sleep. And if you don't do your homework and take care of your pets and love your family. You gotta have a well-rounded everything, and that's when you perform the best.
I have 2 daughters, so they came to me and asked me, Mom, I really want to participate in this. And I signed them up for it, signed myself and my husband up for it.
We have long-term goals of making a summer program so that it doesn't end at the end of the school year, and the sponsors are what make that happen. It's a great way to get their company name out into the media through all sorts of different ways, through Facebook, Twitter, newsprint, magazine print, and then just on the news during race weekend. So they do get a lot of visibility that way. So as far as a marketing tool, it's huge.
For years, many years, their motto has always been, you run, you win. And they also say, if you cross the finish line, you're a winner. And I believe all of the kids can be winners if they just pursue their goals and their dreams.
Get involved. Give what you can. Your time, your expertise, your dollars. Take part in CAF as a volunteer, a participant, or a sponsor.
Great. So race weekend is February 26th and 27th. We'll see you at Road Rogers. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.
Thank you very much. Next up, I'm going to call on Michelle Goot, who's going to present a slide on our meeting schedule for the 2022 bond election and charter election. We have an informal report that's in your packet. It did not have the meeting dates, times, and locations, and we wanted to make sure that the public got to see that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Based on the input that I got from the district offices, this is the proposed meeting schedule we have for the informational meetings to let people know about the election, which will include the bond and the charter election. So I sent a copy of this to each of the district directors. And if anybody wants any changes, modifications, additions, just let me know and we're happy to make those.
I do. I see that there's none in 3, and so at least the Como Community Center, we should add one there. There's
Okay.
nothing close.
And I'd like to consider moving the MLK to Hanley, because I anticipate we'll have a larger audience than MLK can handle.
Okay.
Also, for District 8, Sycamore Community Center, are they equipped to handle more than 50 people? It's going to be in that small room, because if not, we probably need to go to the McDonald YMCA.
Okay, I will check. And I apologize, I had Como on the list, so I'll, okay.
Anybody else for Michelle? Feedback there?
Anybody else?
Good job.
Looks great. Perfect. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle, and we'll make those changes. Next up, we're going to do some employee recognitions or introductions. Mayor, I think you have the first one.
I do. So we received this email into our office, and I think, is Cindy Garza here? Yes. So we all love this, but Cindy, I'm going to read this from a resident that sent an email into our office, and I wanted you to be personally recognized today. She said, I would like to personally express my sincere gratitude and appreciation to the City of Fort Worth's Neighborhood Services Department, specifically the Priority Repair Program, which in this case provided a working heat system for an elderly widow which would have otherwise had to endure cold temperatures this season. I can only suspect the need for this service is considerable and the workload daunting during this period of the year. Certainly those who benefit from any assistance received are eternally grateful. Your efforts may not always be acknowledged, however, rest assured your team changed people's lives for the better. From my personal experience, I would like to recognize and compliment Administrative Technician Mrs. Cindy Garza for her outstanding customer service and professional guidance in applying for this program. It was truly refreshing to find someone who displayed considerable patience, understanding, and empathy in carrying out her duties. Her caring approach reflects exceptional professionalism and stand out as an exemplary model of customer service. Thank you, Mrs. Garza, for everything that you do. And we just wanted to recognize you for your incredible work, Cindy. I think Terrence is here as well, who works with you in the office, and Neighborhood Services Director Victor Turner. Thank you for everything, and you're welcome to say anything if you want to. No, thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Appreciate you. And speaking of keeping us active, apparently you're also a former Zumba instructor for the city of Fort Worth. So if we don't want to be running, we can do Zumba with you, right? Okay, thank you.
It's good to put a face with the name of the guardian angel of so many people. I had no idea that was her.
Congratulations. Next, I'm going to call on Robert Stearns to introduce our new Assistant Director of Economic Development. Robert.
Thank you, members of council. Last summer, many of you weren't here, but we gave a presentation. We were talking about the Preserve the Fort program, and I had the majority of my staff standing up here with me, and I was thanking them for all the hard work that they did on getting that $55 million out the door. And I made a comment at the time. I said, I'm glad that they stuck around with me because that was a really tough load for a lot of those folks. So I think I may have jinxed myself because not more than 6 weeks after that, I lost about 30% of my staff, including the majority of my management team. We had several that got director opportunities in other communities. I had one that had a great opportunity to go to Oxford University, so I couldn't falter for that. And so we were really struggling there for a while. We have been working over the past several months to kind of rebuild the team. You may have seen several of our members. Telemachus Evans joined us as a revitalization coordinator. Ari Mitchell is our research specialist. Arterial Harris joined us as our senior accountant. Michael Hennig, who's been with us for a while, was promoted to economic development manager. And today, I am very proud to announce that Ori Fernandez has joined us as the new assistant director for economic development. I am really excited to have Ori here. She went through a pretty rigorous process, interview process with both of our internal and external stakeholders, and she really blew us away. She is a Rice University graduate, so obviously very intelligent. Also has 2 master's degrees, one in business administration and one in education. She's been the economic development director down in South Texas in Del Rio for about 5 years or so now. Has experience in the Main Street program. She set up a EDC in Del Rio and just brings a number of great skills to the table. So we're really excited to have her join us. I told her I'm not going to scare her off too much this week, but we got a lot on her plate to keep her occupied. So thank you all, and Ori, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I didn't really expect to say much today, but I want to thank you all for the opportunity. It's already, been a great day and a half that I've started, and everyone's been so welcoming. And although I hate to admit this, I'm a San Francisco 49er fan. I hope maybe in a couple of years I'll bleed blue and silver. So I appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to working with everyone here. Thank you.
All right, jumping right into informal reports. We have a large number of them, so I'm going to roll. Ready? The first one is on strategic planning for future COVID surges. Brandon Bennett is available if there are any questions. Moving on.
I do got a question.
All right.
I'm sorry.
All right, Brandon.
It's just real quick. Does this report include, I didn't have a chance to really dive down into it, but does it also include for employees? or is this just for
Yes.
citywide?
We have been offering rapid tests to employees for, greater than a month at this point. Remember, we didn't have a supply of rapid tests initially, and then we started getting stockpiling, and then we've been doing it. One of the things we found was that in some of the work groups, employees didn't feel like they understood the process of how to get a test, rapid test, to have available to them, or to how to use the test. So what we're doing this week and next week is we're actually going out and setting up tables at all the major work sites where employees can come. We'll show them how to use the test. We'll give them a supply of tests and encourage them to use them. And then I've had some conversations with department heads today, and they are going to increase their support and encouragement for employees to take advantage of the rapid tests that we have. And then at beginning, there was very few, so we had to kind of give some guidelines of when to use them, when not to use them. Now we have an abundant supply, so they can be used more proactive than what we've used before. But I will tell you that those that want to use them are using them, and those that are opposed are making their voices be heard. So it's convincing those opposition people to participate is the bigger challenge now.
Going into the spring and the summer, do we have a prediction of when we might have peaks for the surge of COVID?
Everything is based, this is one of the struggles, is, it hasn't changed since the very beginning. The variant comes out, you study the variant, each one's different, and then you respond to it. If you look at it over time, though, there's these waves, these peaks and valleys. So I think it's safe to assume that we'll have another run, probably sometime in the next 90 days. We'll see another uptick.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to say something to Brandon and about all of you around this table. I heard how Brandon aggressively wiped down this table.
That's true.
I heard after I tested positive, thanks to a rapid test. I see you turning red. I heard about it. But what was most hurtful was nobody around this table called and said, "Do you know what Brandon did?" But I do want to tell the world, if you can get a rapid test, do so.
Yeah.
Don't even try to talk folk into getting the vaccine. Just get them to get a test.
Yep.
And that's the start of that dialogue. But Brandon, you and I have a debt to settle on that, because from what I've been told, you were quite dramatic. I think you came out in environmental gear as well.
It was definitely our own Parks and Rec moment. It was awesome.
I thought no one would notice, and it didn't go over real well.
I heard they kept it, but seriously, getting the test is so very important. I had no idea that I'd been walking around positive and didn't know it. And so, again, don't try to change people's convictions, but if you can just get people to get the test, that's the start of opening this knowledge block. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I'll get you later.
And thank you for ratting Brandon out on that one. The second informal report is the 2022 debt financing plan overview, and Reggie Zeno is available if there's any questions. All right, third informal report is the award of the Defense Economic Assistance Adjustment Grant for the Naval Air Station Joint Reserve Base Fort Worth. Dana Bergdorf is available if there are any questions. All right, fourth informal report, proposed future land use change for Casino Beach. Dana Bergdorf is available if there's any questions. We're rolling. Next one, the proposed naming process for the Trinity River Vision Bridges. And Dana Bergdorf is available if there are any questions.
I don't have any questions. I just want to take this opportunity to commend Dana, and where's Dana? Dana and her staff on the efforts that they went into to develop this plan on how we're going to rename these 3 bridges. I invite everybody in the community to take a look at this IR and look at that plan, because it really is about what our residents want. There's a lot of effort into letting you pick these new names, and so I'm very excited about it. Thank you.
And it's on your website too, isn't it?
All right, thank you. Next informal report is the Economic Development Quarter 1 2022 update, and Robert Stearns is available if there are any questions. All right, Next informal report, overview of economic development corporations and proposed creation of economic development fund. Again, Robert Stearns is available if there are any questions. Okay. The next one is on cancer mitigation efforts in the fire department, and Chief Jim Davis is available if there are any questions.
Absolutely.
And also put at your place, because you may have gotten a letter from the Fire Service Resource Network Board and a letter from me back to them just on clarifying some information.
And I'd like to hear from the chief for the benefit of the public. At the good podium, Chief.
Oh, yes. Others, the good podium.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. I was really pleased, but also saddened just at the entry of information you were sharing with us about cancer, our firefighters, and just what we need to do to keep them safe and make them whole.
Yes, ma'am.
So from the time you last visited with us, what can you share with us? Because the public, too, is concerned about this matter.
I first of all, thank you for asking the question. I believe that there has been great conversation among city leadership, city council, the mayor, Local 440, Michael Glenn and his team, about how we can try to dig into 20 years ago and find data and find all of the information that still is available through the different outlets in order to try to look at that specific incident. I believe there's a plan that's been developed, and I believe the next steps are to try to work together to execute a review of that. That's on that conversation. Secondarily, I think that the issue that Mr. Cook brings up regarding a letter and a response back to an organization, it saddens me a little bit about the way it was done, because I believe that there's been a fair amount of transparency with the group. I feel that there's been a miscommunication of which I will take part ownership in that. I probably could have done better in trying to make sure that there's communication there. I don't believe that there's any malintent on anybody's part. I think that that group, as well as the leadership team of the Fort Worth Fire Department, and with support of Valerie Washington and the city management team, has been interested in making sure that we afford our folks the opportunity to go home safe at the end of the shift. The last conversation I had with Councilmember Williams, it's very obvious that, you know, there's a peer-to-peer conversation going on what's called forever chemicals in our community. There was a conversation today of, you know, is the fire department awake and at the table discussing what this looks like moving forward? And the answer is absolutely yes. And so, you know, it's a matter of moving forward from this point here. But my interest is to assure everybody here in this room that we have maximized and made the best use with the best intent, and we have not misinformed, misappropriated, misapplied any of the funds and or the expectations that the public and or the city has from the fire department to reduce the risk of cancer in the Fort Worth firefighters. Thank you, ma'am.
Chief, thank you for this report. I'll be really short, but I just wanted to say that you know, this issue is really important to me and to this table. You know, you and our firefighters, you know, risk your lives on so many occasions, right? Y'all are running in when folks are running away, and y'all are fighting fires in some cases that you know, create chemical exposure that leads to risks of cancer. And then also y'all work with substances that are necessary in fighting those fires that also create exposure risks. And so, one, I want to say I'm grateful, and two, I want to say that we need to do something about that. And so, I know we've been talking offline, and I want to follow up this IR with another IR specifically around PFAS, the forever chemicals that you're describing, and looking at how do we incorporate mitigation solutions, considering what we know and what the field of research is continuing to learn and know about PFAS and its risk to people, especially our firefighters. So I just wanted to say that during this IR, but I'll follow up later on with a follow-up request so that we can dive deeper into it. and work together on it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We have a lot of information. We'll immediately begin putting it in some form of report that is actionable to you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief.
Chief, just one comment right there. As you know, you and I and others attended, a recent, over the holiday break, small ceremony, accepting some of the extractor equipment at Station 12. You and I had spoken about that. It is important to have that necessary equipment to our firefighters, right? But I also believe, too, that, we all participate in, coordinating where those best go. You as fire chief, offer that kind of indispensable input. Certainly the gift is very welcome, and, going forward, seeing where it can be best deployed. But again, it's appreciated there is an improvement there at Station 12. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
And next is the informal report. Chief, hold on a second. I think you're up again. The next informal report is female fire recruitment, fitness requirements, and hiring data. Once again, Chief Jim Davis. Any questions?
I've got a couple. Hey, Chief, how are you doing?
Good, ma'am.
All right, so when I went through this IR, the first thing that caught my eye was the physical or the structure of how you recruit female firefighters. And so we have the hiring and recruiting section. So my question to you is, how many women and minorities are permanently assigned to that particular section?
Honestly, it's a very small unit. It spools up with people who come together as we get closer to a test. There is, generally speaking, one African-American captain that his name's Thaddeus Raven. He is the lead over that group. That is his full-time job, so technically one, ma'am.
Okay. And do they have to be firefighters to be part of that particular group? Can you hire a civilian to be on that team? Say, for instance, a woman.
I don't believe that there's any reason why civilians should not or could not be part of a recruitment team, no.
Okay, I'd like you to look into that because I think that's probably a barrier to, a barrier is when you've got, it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes if you've never walked in them. And so if we're trying to up the number of female recruits, I think it would be beneficial to have a woman's voice in that particular room. I've got a couple of other questions for you. Camp Heat was one day, and we did it in 2019.
Yes, ma'am, and it hasn't been done since, partially due to a lot of the different things and the challenges that we've had with, we went 20 without giving a test because of COVID and stuff like that. So Camp Heat was a program that was designed to actually demonstrate the type of the type of job that firefighting and emergency medical services is, the type of expectations from a strength and mobility aspect, and to actually, it was based off of some other programs that have been put together on feeling, in a day in the life of type role.
Okay.
So yes.
And I know the age range was 14 to 19, so some of them don't quite meet our age requirement yet.
Not yet.
But did you see any of the young women that participated in that program come back and apply?
So that's one of the great things that Thad Raven has done, and I'll sit here and brag about the work that he's done all day long, where he actually uses it as a mentorship opportunity. He does bring in other like groups, in this case, we're talking females. So females of the Fort Worth Fire Department, to not just be mentors, but to also, has stayed in contact with them at every step in the process to just prepare, encourage, and to basically keep them engaged in the process and keep them moving forward with preparation and knowing what it takes to be a successful candidate for us to hire. So yes, we have.
Thank you. And then I want to talk about the physical ability test, because I know there's been some discussion as to whether or not that's a barrier, and I know that particular standard is set by the state, correct?
I'm sorry, ma'am.
Is that our physical fitness standards for firefighters, that's set by the state or by
Yes.
us internally?
So So there are state expectations for the hiring process, yes.
Okay. And so as it relates to our expectations here at City of Fort Worth, are those expectations the same as the state level? Are they greater than the state level?
No, ma'am, we've done nothing to make our process any more difficult or disparate than what is required at a minimum baseline from the state.
Okay. And so I read here that says the second attempt to pass rate for all candidates has been 100% in the last 3 years. So is it safe to say then that our female recruits aren't necessarily failing out because of the physical portion of this?
So that's part of the entrance exam requirements, correct? And the pass rate on the physical agility test has been quite high. And part of that has been, that was changed prior to me arriving here. And so I do not have a whole lot of experience with what was done beforehand. But I understand that there was a higher, and I use air quote, washout rate at the test at that point. It was changed under Chief Jackson. It has had an impact of a higher pass rate, and I'll compliment Captain Raven on that as well, because what he has done is put preparatory programs together to demonstrate the upper body strength that's required to do some of the skills that are required to successfully complete it, and has made the Bolin facility available for people to train, practice, and understand best ways to be successful leading up to it. So he's been a big part of the success of it. But the struggles that we have had have not been through that process. It's been through the repetitive need to do it through the training academy. That's where we have had some struggles with strength and upper body stuff regarding that.
So they're passing the initial entry exam, but not a final exam or intermediate points along the way, physical fitness tests?
So there have been struggles through the training academy with getting, our goal is to train people not to do it once, but to be able to do it so it becomes muscle memory, so they not just learn to do it right, but they fail to do it wrong, right? So part of it has been, okay, that's great, and let's take a break and let's get after it again, so we can get to the state minimum. In a lot of cases, our recruit instructors will say, yeah, we can get them we can get this or that, or we can get a recruit candidate through one time in order to meet the minimum standard. But getting it on a repetitive basis to make sure that the muscle memory and the skill is embedded, that has been a bigger challenge for our folks over time.
Okay. You gave some stats here on when we see our female candidates failing out of the process. But we don't have anything to compare it to for their male counterparts, right? So it's hard for me to say if, they're failing the interview process at a higher rate, or the background check at a higher rate, or, whatever that is. And so I'd be interested in getting that data.
Yes, ma'am, you deserve that. We'll make sure we get you the comparable data.
And then before I let you go, I just want to say, with respect to the interview, that's much more subjective than it is than these other qualifications. And so my charge would be to you and your staff is to go through and look at that process, those questions you ask, what that looks like when they're in the room, who's in the room, is it representative, is it all white males, right? Or is it a diverse interview panel? What types of questions are you asking, and to what extent can implicit bias play a role in whether or not we're deciding if they pass or fail that interview process?
So I appreciate that. I'll answer it very briefly by saying that every member of the Fort Worth Fire Department has gone through implicit bias training, and every group of oral board members are picked with a specific goal, and that is to bring the best candidate for firefighter to the city of Fort Worth forward. That group is made of diversity. That group is supported by HR here in the city. There is a training session that's done with them prior to make sure that the rules and regulations of the city are followed, and that there is no purposeful intent to eliminate any particular group based on any type of Title VII violation.
So I would encourage you, in the same way that you train our firefighters to have muscle memory for the physical tasks that they do. Implicit bias training is not a one-time go, so let's, and this is to every department, not just yours, but let's make that muscle memory as well.
Understood, ma'am. Thank you.
Chief, I just want to add really quick, to echo that, you know, we're working in a work group together on the Homegrown Heroes initiative to create a career pathway for our high school students. I think it's important, and I think we've said this in our work groups, but I just want to say it here for the record too. I think it's important that in our goals that we also create the pipeline for our amazing young ladies to take up a career in this as well. I think part of the challenges to what we're seeing today is the runway that we're preparing folks, and also the process in which we're, bringing people in. But I just want to encourage you that as our teams work together, that we tackle that challenge even in that program as well. So.
And I appreciate that. I'm very proud of the work that we've done, but it does not mean that we don't have we have a lot of room for growth in that area. But we're working at it every day.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. The next informal report is on the Farrington Field redevelopment study, and Fernando Costa is available if there's any questions.
Fernando, if you could come and just, for the public's benefit, give a very brief overview of this process and what it's going to look like, because I know folks in Fort Worth are pretty emotionally tied to that stadium.
Yes. The Fort Worth Independent School District owns the Farrington Field site, which of course includes the stadium and the field house, the Billingsley Field House. The school district and the City of Fort Worth are co-sponsoring a workshop this week, today, tomorrow, Thursday, which will end with a public presentation by an 11-member panel from the Urban Land Institute, Dallas-Fort Worth District Council, on opportunities to redevelop the Farrington Field site, bearing in mind how that site could serve to attract entrepreneurial businesses in line with our economic development strategic plan, but at the same time, being respectful of the historic resources on the site. Of course, both the stadium and the field house are now listed on the National Register of Historic Places. There are other challenges associated with any redevelopment of the site, including gas well setbacks and the need for drainage improvements to support development throughout the cultural district. And not the least of the challenges is accommodating the stock show and other users of the parking lot in connection with large public events. So these are all significant challenges. The idea behind the workshop is to bring to Fort Worth some of the best minds that we can find to determine what the possibilities might be. And one of the options, of course, is essentially to support the status quo and not make any changes. But it was the view of all the interested parties that it would make sense to explore a wide range of ideas before making any conclusion.
And just so we're clear, this is the dreaming phase, so to speak.
It is purely a brainstorming exercise. There is no expressed intent on the part of any party to proceed toward any redevelopment at this time.
And we will definitely engage with the public before we do that.
That's
correct?
certainly our intent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. The next informal report is about fictitious license plates, also known as paper license plates. And Deputy Chief Criado is here if there are any questions.
I would like to hear a report that's a
coming
problem
up.
in my district.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Thank you for having me. Here to answer any questions you may have in reference to the fictitious license plates, prevalent issue that we're having, not only locally, but statewide and nationally as well, as you've all seen in the media here as of late.
Before asking specific questions, at least from me, what is it that you could update us on since you guys have been looking into it? And of course, everyone has seen the NBC5 news report. Through my area, my NPO often has to come through and look at these paper plates. And whenever I see them, I'm always trying to take pictures of them. So what is it that you all are doing to help with this? And how does your work flow into the state?
Right. Actually, we all know this is a hot topic, and prior to this informal report, Councilwoman, it's been on our radar, and I can tell you that albeit a state DMV administrative issue, it's incumbent upon all of us as law enforcement professionals, locally, state, and nationally, and we continue to collaborate to combat this issue. I can tell you as far as Fort Worth goes, we currently have 3 open investigations on 3 locations in our city that are distributing and selling these tags illegally. So it's something that didn't just come on our radar. It's been going on. We do run across a lot of issues. Councilman Crane asked about, is it enough probable cause to pull over a vehicle if you just see a tag? It is, depending on the fact that when the officer runs a check on the computer, an in-car computer, and if it comes back, the majority of the time it comes back legitimate. It's a legitimate e-tag or paper tag. So that's not enough to pull a vehicle over. However, you have to look for another traffic violation to pull them over, and or if you observe an individual occupy the vehicle that is wanted for a warrant, then of course we can pull them over and then delve into the investigation even further as far as the temp tags. A lot of these temp tags.
How does your process go? You know, how do you fight this? And can you think of any success stories you can share so that the public will know exactly what can I do to help police fight this matter? That's the best way I can ask it.
First and foremost, we can't do it alone, right? So we ask for the public, the people in the communities, the people that walk into the stores, the people that know used car lot owners, that if you have information that you know, we hear. If you're in the neighborhoods, you hear. Please pass that information along to us. Like I said, we've got 3 locations we're working on now, but I'm certain there's more because it's a national issue, not just local. You have the statistics, that numbers that we have. I can tell you we've written an operational, special operation plan that we started last weekend. We used our covert and overt specialized units to conduct that in partnership with our state DMV and DPS assisted, Tarrant County Auto Theft Task Force that assisted us, and we'll continue collaborating along with COG in the future. Some of those numbers just from 2 hours, 2 4-hour days when we ran the detail this last weekend. And we focused on the areas, the high crime locations, and we all know game rooms. We've had an issue with game rooms in the past. It's nothing new. Focused on game room areas, hotel areas, where we have a lot of crime, drugs going on. So we focused in those areas, and we had 41 traffic stops. 13 of those vehicles were towed, and this is all related to fictitious tags. 11 citations, 12 misdemeanor arrests, 4 felony arrests, and we generated 14 reports, which will be ongoing investigations that we can also forward to the state, to DMV, to assist in hopes of getting to the source, to revoking those licenses so they can revoke their privilege of printing these e-tags out. We also seized drugs, several methamphetamine and marijuana, and we seized 14 of those temporary fictitious tags.
Thank you.
And we're going to continue our efforts, of course. In the next few weeks, we're going to continue the special operation, and we're going to continue collaborating with COG and DMV. We have future meetings in place to continue this effort to combat this nationwide issue.
Thank you.
Chief, thank you. We do have Chris Klaus here from the North Central Texas Council of Governments. They have been a strong partner of the city in addressing the issue of fictitious license plates, and I'd like to ask Chris if you would just say a word about it.
Thank you, Fernandez. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, my name is Chris Klaus with the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and this is something, I wish I was here on different subject matter, but the reality is that this is growing exponentially. A lot of it is a result of funding that was not provided to us from the legislative session a few years ago. It was just a matter of time, I think, before we start seeing this uptick as a result of the enforcement being diminished as a result of those resources that were not provided back to us. This is all dedicated funding that was collected from all the residents when they went and got their car inspected. $6 of that inspection fee went into this fund. So we'll be going back again to the legislative session. So there's 2 parts of it. You heard about the enforcement part. After a situation has occurred, we'll be going back to the legislature again. There's been a recent shakeup at the Department of Motor Vehicles. We hope to be able to work with them and the legislature to try to prevent this from happening and making it much more difficult from the onset of these individuals going in and being able to just print paper tags like there's no tomorrow, dupe a lot of the citizens in the community. And Councilwoman, with your leadership at the Regional Transportation Council, to supplement some of the funding that we haven't been getting, the RTC has allocated some federal funds to be able to assist, because you need insurance to be able to get your car inspected, not only a safety inspection, but an emissions inspection. And we know that we're not compliant with, the emissions in our region. And there's, I don't know, for the last 25, 30 years, there's been at least one fatality a day somewhere in Texas on public roads. So we're trying to address that. Obviously, the makeup of the car and how safe the car is has a big influencing factor on that. And then to get your car registered, you need inspection. So if you're getting a fraudulent registration, then you probably don't have inspection. You probably don't have insurance. There's a lot of safety, emissions, and of course, just bad stories that we hear about on the roadway. So we do have funding set aside. Unfortunately, it's federal funding. It's taken a little bit to get all the agreements necessary to be able to start dispersing that money within the region, to be able to support the enforcement efforts that we once had, with the hope that this is a supplemental money or startup money before we can get the money that's already been collected from the regions back to us to have that effort.
Thank you. David, one thing I'll share is I think this proves that this is more than just a neighborhood situation, and that even though it might seem to be quite minor, whenever you see a paper tag, there is a good chance that that's a driver who should not be on the road, and who knows what history that driver has. So I just say thank you to police, the COG, and everybody else who's joining us on this fight.
And I'll just make a comment, Chief. Thanks. When I asked for this a number of months ago, or whenever it was in response to a couple of citizens that had gotten in car accidents, and then they didn't have insurance, the people driving that with paper plates. So this is a bigger, wider, I'm glad you brought that up, Mayor Pro Tem. It's a bigger, wider issue across the city, and really across the state, and I guess across the country. Absolutely. But I want to make sure we're doing everything we can, because those people are out of pocket for their deductible and everything else when they've been doing everything right. So whatever we can do to stop it. One thing I did notice, you had a good idea about reporting it. I don't want to ever encourage anybody to be a vigilante police officer, like it sounds like Mayor Pro Tem Bivens is taking photos. But I will say this, we do have the My FW app, My Fort Worth app, and I just looked, and there's a way to make vehicle complaints, but there's not something on there about paper tags. So I would see if we can figure out a way to do that so citizens can do exactly what you're doing and reporting that, and then getting the information to y'all to follow up on. Thanks.
It can range from felonies to something minor, just trying to avoid paying tolls. So we've actually had some of our covert units witness some criminals in the process or about to commit a crime, and they pull over and physically take the hard tag, the aluminum tag, off their vehicle and put a temp tag prior to committing the crime. So this is a serious issue, and it goes to something minor as not paying toll tags, insurance, avoiding taxes, to committing felonies. They've been involved with thefts, felony thefts, stolen cars, robberies, and even homicides. So it's a serious issue across the nation.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. I guess it's safe to assume that if they've got these fraudulent tags, they're probably not just committing that one crime of the fraudulent tags. And so do you see any correlation with the additional crime that these folks are committing? Is it all over the board, or do you typically, is it drug related? Is it gang related? Is it theft related? Is there any kind of pattern that?
Right. The majority of the crime that we've seen is what I've stated earlier, is your thefts, your burglars, vehicle and home burglars, and your robbers and your homicides. You know, they're trying to hamper our ability to identify the vehicle, people in those vehicles, stolen vehicles. But rest assured that we're going to continue combating the issue. We have this special operation that's still going on. We're going to continue to collaborate with our partners. And I can tell you that it is a DMV administrative issue. However, I think they're being proactive with the legislation that's been changed. And I've personally spoken to one of the board members, and they've called emergency meetings to possibly put in place fingerprints for these individuals that are trying to obtain the license. Not only that, just random site checks, because we all know these individuals that are obtaining their license fraudulently There's not even a brick and mortar location. They're just there to print these tags out and sell them and put them out in vehicles. Another thing we have seen in our offices run across the issue is you run across a fictitious, well, it's not fictitious, so we can't call it fictitious. It's valid, it's in the system. They're duplicating it, triplicating it, and they're putting it on several different vehicles when they go out to commit crimes. So it's a huge issue, but that's what we're here for, to combat it. And I think I think we look forward to combating it, and I think we'll be able to get to the bottom or the source. And our goal on these special operations is to gain intel to get back to those locations, to those individuals that are selling and printing these out illegally.
Thanks, Chief.
Chief, hold on a second. I have a question. Sorry, guys. When it comes to the automated license plate readers, Deputy Chief Criado, I mean, there are a number of ways, I guess, that they struggle to figure out what is legitimate and what is a counterfeit one, right? There could be even copies of a legitimate paper plate out there. And as far as what we use here at Fort Worth PD, can those automated license plate readers say if they catch or they say a car is identified, okay, as a certain paper plate, and then somewhere across town, there's another vehicle with the same paper plate?
Absolutely.
Is our system smart enough to say, hey, I have a hit here on the same plate, paper plate, in two different locations? Can our system distinguish that? Is it capable of doing that?
Without compromising our investigative efforts, right? Yes, you're exactly correct. Our LPRs and our flock cameras do have that capability. And that's, like I stated before, that's an issue we're having. You can have 50 of the same tag on different vehicles, but so to speak, their bolos are put out, yes. And it may hamper our ability temporarily or delay it, but we will get to the bottom of it. We will get to the individual that's doing it or the suspects that's utilizing that temp tag. So
Great.
Rest assured, our guys, our boots on the ground, are working hard to combat the issue.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kiki.
Let's see, next informal report is the fund balance allocation of $11 million for arterial projects in the 2022 bond program. And William Johnson is available if there are any questions. All right, next informal report is on Lakeland Edition in Holdings and the Fort Worth Nature Center. Richard Zavala is available for that history lesson if anybody wants it. All right. Next informal report is monthly development activity report, and DJ Harrell is available if there are any questions. Moving on. Next informal report is the proposed 2022 comprehensive plan, and Eric Flatiger is available if there are any questions.
Yes, I am. I have a couple questions.
Okay, Eric?
Actually, Eric, I just have one, and I'll ask it while you're walking up here because my colleague, Mr. Nettles, on my right, is apparently antsy to get this over with. I just have one question, and it is, I've looked at, thank you for putting all of this together. When are we updating our vision and goals?
You have.
Let me ask first, when was the last time we did that?
That's a good question. I think with some minor tweaks, it goes back to the 2000 comprehensive plan effort.
And was that our first plan ever?
It's the first real modern comprehensive plan the city of Fort Worth has had. That's correct.
So you're saying we haven't done it since we decided to do a modern comprehensive plan? Okay.
That's right.
Thank you.
But guess what we have coming up, Elizabeth? A retreat, and we can vision away. Eric is so excited.
I'm very excited.
I might have already sowed that seed.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Next informal report is the proposed update of the Panther Island form-based district development standards and guidelines. And Daniel Liel is available if there are any questions.
No specific questions, but I would like it presented to the record. I've been getting a lot of questions lately, a lot of interest, ginned up, of course, with the announcement of the fund allocation from the Corps of Engineers. to that project. So if he can just give me a quick summary for our viewing audience, we may have questions.
Daniel?
And Daniel, basically what I'm looking for is if you can give kind of an overview of the process that we intend to embark on, to achieve that, goal.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just want to introduce Savannah Steiner on behalf of Randy Hutchison. I have to excuse him for personal reasons today, but she has a wealth of knowledge on the background and where Panther Island is headed to.
Okay, that's fine.
So we like to update all of our form-based codes approximately every 5 years, just to adjust the codes to development that's happening and new trends in urban planning as well. This one has not been updated since 2016, so we are looking at several things within this code, including the minimum and max height requirements, increased flexibility and setbacks. We are adjusting things to deal with the canals. We're rewriting the sign code within the ordinance. We're refining the street tree requirements, and we're updating the graphics illustrations and then aligning the plan with the newest and latest engineering for Panther Island as well. So we'll be working with community stakeholders throughout this process. The purpose of this IR is just really to update you guys that this process is beginning now.
Okay, so when it starts, when do we expect to finish? Any approximate date?
We anticipate finalizing the amendments with our stakeholders over the next few months and throughout the summer. And then in the fall, we'll be back here for the public process.
Okay, and if you can you just illustrate a little bit more on what that public process will look like? For example, when we did the Stockyards form-based code, we did charrettes as part of that public process. Any ideas how we're going to do it for the Panther Island area?
I would have to get back to you on that. I don't think that we have any design charrettes planned at this time,
okay.
But I do know that we will be meeting with various stakeholders throughout the process, and those will not just be Panther Island stakeholders, but a larger community input as well.
Okay, just as long as there is some reasonable component of that public process inclusive of community and stakeholders. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I just want to thank David, Cook, and Carlos for spearheading this project on behalf of the TRVA board and membership as a city. This is ours to own in the form-based code process, and it's a huge opportunity for the city of Fort Worth. My request might be as we get closer in the summer and fall, making sure we have the appropriate level of private sector input into what's possible, and importantly, most marketable into the future. This is an opportunity to double size the downtown. Many cities do not have that opportunity, and I think it's more than just a public charrette process. This is a huge vision that a lot of people have a lot of input into, and it's our chance to get it right. Thank you for working on this.
Thank you. Okay, next informal report was the May 2022 election outreach plan, and Michelle shared the schedule with you. If there are any other questions, Michelle's available. Otherwise, I'm going to the last and final informal report, and that's on ways to watch city council meetings. And Michelle Good is available if there are any questions.
I have questions.
Do you? Michelle?
And I think I was one of the ones that asked for this IR with the understanding about Facebook. And I just did a little research, and I just kind of wanted to. I have a hard time when we say we just can't do it no more with being the 12th largest city. And so when I did the research, because representing District 8, social media is very huge for my district. And I believe that I wish we can find a way to include Facebook, because when I did the research, October the 12th, we had 1.1 thousand views. September the 21st, we had 1.3 thousand views. For the work session, September the 14th, we had 1.5 thousand. August 3rd, we had 1.9 thousand views. June work session, we had June 22, we had 2,000.3 views. And so that tells me that Facebook is a key component of making sure that the city of Fort Worth remains transparent, where people can react and just easily get it onto their phones. I do have a substitute idea I see the website, it says fortworthtexas.gov FWTV. If there is any way where when someone goes automatically to fortworthtexas.gov, there is either a link or the video actually showing on the main page. So every time that we go live, that there could be a link directly on the main page. Because if you don't know to do /FWTV, it is very hard to find the link. Now, it's not a substitute, it's an addition to.
Okay.
Because I still want us to figure out how we can fix the Facebook market. There's major churches and other locations that broadcast 3, 4 hours, 5 hours long. And I'm sure, David, that we have the money to figure out how we can make sure that someone is operating this system and finding it. And I think you said we need a person to monitor and troubleshoot during the entire broadcast. And so I think we just figure out a way. We have a lot of city staff that stays here when we're here. And so those are my comments. I really hope that we can find a way.
Okay. All right. We will revisit the Facebook.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, I think it's a great idea what Chris suggested, having the constant feed on our homepage. And so I would say let's take that a step further. And when we're not live, the city produces a ton of content, whether it's static images or videos on different initiatives. And I'd like to see that as well to free up that dead time, so to speak, so that no matter if we're live or not, you come to the City of Fort Worth website, you're learning something about what we've got going on that you might not already know, or you get to watch whatever meeting we've currently got that's riveting at the moment.
Michelle, quick question for you right now. When you're live streaming via YouTube, isn't there a way to embed that link and YouTube video into the Facebook page for the City of Fort Worth, so that you're not having to stream on two sources?
Yes.
Utilizing YouTube. That might be the better thing to do,
Okay.
since you're having those technical back-end issues. YouTube's a little bit more user-friendly. You're not having to keep up with it. But if you just embed that link into Facebook, that may allow the users that are more familiar with Facebook, that's just a thought for your
Okay.
staff to look into.
We can do that.
Yeah.
Michelle, you should know I'm Facebooking you live right now. And before we got this new council, I used to Facebook Live all the time because people did watch, and it is very helpful. It's not the easiest place to get to. We don't have the best parking, and it's kind of a hassle to come down here unless you have real business to address. But I started back Facebooking Live when I realized we really weren't going Facebook anymore. So we want to make City Council must-see TV.
Okay.
And that's kind of hard because we can be boring, but I promise you, when we're talking budgets, programming, COVID, a lot of people look to us. So I'm crossing my fingers you'll be able to come up with a rabbit out of your hat, and we can get this back going again, Facebook Live through YouTube or however. But thank you for looking at it, and thanks to Pastor Chris for making sure we know this. Thank you. I got you too. And your partner in crime.
All right. Anything else?
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Mayor, that concludes my report.
Okay, questions from council regarding any city council action items, which will be for next week on the 22nd, upcoming items? No. We're going to move then to the presentation on Alliance Texas Economic Impact with Mike Berry from Hillwood, who's been very patient. Thank you, Mike.
And we'll get a chance to ask have future
At the
agenda
end,
items
yeah,
later.
this is, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Mayor, members of the council, thank you again for the opportunity to come present on the economic impact of Alliance Texas. Gina, I think we need to get you a custom-made stand
And I know
for your
Hill-
iPad so that you don't don't have to hold
Hillwood
it.
can do that for me, Mike. Hillwood
Oh,
can do that
we
for
can
me.
do that. We can-
Okay.
There's some things we have a hard time building, but we could
Do
probably
that.
build that.
Thank you.
So for those of you who are new on the council, let me just give you a short background on how this has evolved. plus years ago, when we began the development of Alliance Airport, was really the first thing that happened to open up the entire Alliance, Texas region. We felt like it was important to report out to our public partners on an annual basis how the initial seed capital that really was public sector driven, how it was performing. And I was trying to go back to the first year that I made this presentation. It was probably 25 years ago. Been through a lot of councils and a lot of mayors since then. But that is the purpose behind it. So it's not to come here and, tout the success of Alliance Texas. It's really more about providing you with the economic data to show the return on the original investment that was put into the project. I do want to highlight and thank and give a shout out to Patricia Garcia. Patricia and I have been working together on this presentation for probably all 25 years. Yeah. So we've gone through a lot of councils and mayors together. But I greatly appreciate the fact that every time I walk up here that it's ready to go. So is it this? No, I'm punching the wrong button. I got to punch this one? Okay, sorry. So I'm going to quickly, I just thought you'd enjoy maybe a few high-level economic impact facts on Texas, on North Texas and Fort Worth, and sort of a reflection of why we're doing so well here in this part of the country. Then a few highlights on activity in and around Alliance. Talk a little bit about innovation, some of the things we're doing there, and then I'll close with a 2-minute video. And I know you've been here a long time, so I'll try to go through it very briefly. You do have a copy of this packet. If you don't have it yet, you will have it at your seat, so you can feel free to go through it afterwards and call me if you have any questions. This is something I thought you'd appreciate. This is sort of brand new data about the movement across the country, out migration from certain states and in migration in other states, and it's backed up. That bottom fact shows you the actual U-Haul movement data across the country, but probably no surprise to you that New York and California are seeing the greatest out migration. Florida and Texas are seeing the greatest in migration. And that trend seems to be something that is going to continue. Then when you get to you hone in on the North Texas region, the power of our region is really just continuing to grow in stature around the country. We're the #1 job growing region. Most people don't realize that we are the #2 ranked tech job center in America. We're not really known, our brand, and we struggle with this. We all do, trying to become more of a tech center. But we really do, when you just look at our workforce makeup, we do have a very, very strong tech workforce. The other thing that I think is important is the fact that we have 3 Tier 1 universities in the North Texas region, which is huge now for corporate growth and recruitment, and we don't talk about that enough. The state now has 11 Tier 1 universities in our state. So, a huge strength of the region that we probably don't promote well enough. And then when you drill into Fort Worth, you all know these facts. We're the 12th largest city, second fastest growing city, and huge continued growth. I thought this was an interesting one, that we were the top attended city for Global Entrepreneurship Week for 2 years in a row. So that tells you a lot about the fact that we are making progress in becoming known more as an entrepreneurial, innovation-minded city. The good news I have to report today is we just passed $100 billion in cumulative economic impact, the Alliance Texas Corridor. And how we do that is we have an economic model that we built 25 years ago. Actually, we didn't build it, but our economic impact consultant did. And then we continue to take tax dollars, investment dollars, payroll dollars, and you throw it all into that model, and that's how you come up with the cumulative economic impact. So it was a big milestone this year when that number jumped over 100 billion. It's actually 100.3 billion. I'm sorry, 100.6. And then you see the growth trajectory here. So it's continuing to move upward, and we hope we can keep that graph going in that same direction. The other good news, and this is something I remember vividly, I remember standing here, didn't seem like that long ago, when we surpassed 1 billion in total property taxes paid off of the Alliance Texas properties. It's now reached 3.13 billion in total property taxes paid. That doesn't include sales tax, and that doesn't include personal property. That's just ad valorem. So pretty exciting growth trajectory there. And you can see the breakdown by all of the municipalities and governmental agencies that the taxes are paid into, Fort Worth being there at 621. The school districts are the largest beneficiary just because their tax rates are higher. But Northwest Independent School District is over $1 billion now in total property tax receipts. So that's why they've been able to grow like they have. And then here's the graph, just honing in specifically on Fort Worth. You can see that graph's going in the right direction. Beyond that, beyond just the dollars, the job growth is continuing to be very, very strong. We're now over 63,000 total jobs working in the Alliance Texas program right now. Almost 560 companies and over 53 million square feet of space, and that's growing. Some of the highlights, the whole region, the whole North Fort Worth region is now becoming one of the fastest growing, and particularly in terms of industrial. I think we're the #1 industrial submarket in North Texas now. But that's reflected in our building activity. And then Charles Schwab completed this year, even though they're not fully back in the office because of COVID, they completed construction on their 1.2 million square foot headquarters, which will, we believe, bring a lot of continued spinoff development. And then BNSF, the Alliance Intermodal Facility, just became, last year, we surpassed Southern California. We're now the #1 in terms of volume in the country. So that was a pretty exciting milestone. The airport itself is just, if you haven't been up there recently, I encourage you to come up really on any day. It's different than we've ever experienced before, particularly with Amazon, FedEx just continuing to grow. So that's being translated into huge growth in cargo operations and in fuel sales. And we're expanding our FBO, so that ought to bring in a lot more corporate aviation activity. One thing we're very focused on is workforce and education, and so we're spending a lot of time with our education partners and our corporate partners. These are just 3 examples of programs that we're actively trying to grow. I think the Student Influencers Program is really one of our best efforts so far, because it actually we select from all the school districts in the region a group of students who actually are allowed to come in and engage with the companies and go through internships and get real exposure to the variety of career opportunities that are there. We're spending a lot of time on innovation. I think you've heard us report on this before, but our Mobility Innovation Zone, which started literally on 1 sheet of paper, has now become a real living, breathing center for innovation. We've got a number of the leading mobility innovation companies coming into Alliance right now. These are 4 who are engaged in different pieces of the surface freight mobility sector, from long-haul trucking down to last-mile trucking and everything in between. And all of these technologies are actually working today out at Alliance. You can come see these autonomous trucks actually delivering freight, both on our interstate highways, in our local region, and then in short hops. And then on the air side, same thing. Delivery of freight via drones is a little bit further down the road on a commercial basis than on the surface, but it is happening very fast. This company on the right, Wing, is a Google company. We were able to convince them to come here and stand up their launch site for their commercial program. and they're now operating at Alliance every day. They're operating across North Texas. They have a partnership with Walgreens, and they're actually delivering packages on a daily basis. On March the 2nd, to try to continue to grow this and to make Fort Worth really a center for mobility innovation, we're hosting, in partnership with Texas A&M and the Fort Worth Chamber and Visit Fort Worth, a conference at the Hotel Drover, where we'll have industry leaders from all these companies coming in and spending time here and brainstorming different strategies, working towards commercialization. So we're really excited about that. We hope that'll become an annual event that we can grow. So lastly, 2 minutes of just to show you, since I can't give you the whole story in this presentation, we've got 2 minutes to hopefully show you sort of everything that's going on in the Alliance Texas corridor. So a lot going on. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
That was awesome. Who has questions? Carlos, did you have something? Go ahead.
Yeah, quick question, Mike. You know, autonomous vehicles, big interest of mine. In general, maybe maybe they haven't been adopted long enough yet, but eventually, you're going to get fewer claims, less fraud, and there's going to be a shift from liability for the driver, onto the vehicle. Have you seen any cost savings yet so far in your adoption of?
Too early.
Yeah,
It's too early. It's a long run before you'll actually see real cost efficiencies, but they're still in the pre-commercialization stage. If you believe the numbers, they believe by 2030 that 30% of all freight, long haul and middle mile freight will be moving autonomously at that point. I think you'll start to see some real economies. But there's more of a push now than ever because the driver shortage is really acute in this country. So, a lot of people think, well, autonomy is going to take jobs away from humans. It's just going to barely fill the gap, fill the shortage. But I think we're ways off before you actually see real measurable, but you've got to crawl, walk, and then run.
Right. Thank you, Mike.
Yes, sir.
Carrie, and then Leonard.
Just overall, Mike, thank you to Russell and Ross Pro Jr. for all the work y'all do for Fort Worth. I don't think, we enjoy the great places to live from Parkland to Heritage to Harvest and love eating at the restaurants at Alliance Town Center. And thank you for bringing the office, but also the jobs. Alliance Airport will surpass DFW by 2025 as the largest job center. Fort Worth, you are regularly out there promoting Fort Worth and Alliance, Texas, and bringing, top innovative companies to this city. And so it's not just the residents or the restaurants, it's also those jobs that you're bringing. Some good news, if you have not heard, is last Tuesday, this mayor and council injected another $50 million in our bond package for roads, east-west arterials along there. And so we're trying to keep pace with all y'all's efforts. And so that'll be for the May election. And again, y'all are just engaged, whether it be RTC or TxDOT, you're regularly engaged, and the city of Fort Worth would not be the same without y'all. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it.
Leonard and then Gina.
Mike, thank you for the presentation today. It's good and bad news, I guess, for District 7. As Carrie outlined, there's just extraordinary growth that you all have facilitated over the years, such that that area will no longer be in District 7. So
I know we're sad about that.
our time has been short together,
Has been short.
but we're so proud and thankful for what Hillwood has done, and certainly for Mr. Perot's leadership in building out that area. So just a couple comments, though, on what you presented today, Mike. I want to be sure, I think, if you all think this is a good idea, in preparation for our retreat, I think, next week, that some of this information, I think, would be really valuable for our facilitator, as, things that we should be talking about and highlighting about the go forward. Just strikes me that way. So thank you in terms of the innovation and those kinds of ideas. And then I just want to finish by saying, I think, it's really hard to describe the impact that you all have had in the area. I mean, it's the detail that Carrie went through in terms of the economic growth and certainly the population. But, something that you and I have talked about that I think is very appropriate to share, and it's somewhat just a little bit of the recognition of how the city feels about what you all have created out there, is renaming the airport as we know it as Alliance Field right now. We're going to talk about some name like the Perot Airfield at Alliance. I think it was.
I don't think we changed the name. We probably
added to it. Correct. So I think
that's really in honor of Ross Perot Sr.
Yes, right. So I think that's going to be great. We're going to put that in front of council here probably relatively soon, next couple sessions. But again, it's a well-deserved recognition. So we're going to be excited to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Leonard.
I like the idea, Mike, because the people in Dallas, for whatever reason, think that they're the only Perot interest, and this is home, for you guys. So I think that's highly appropriate. I gig Dallas whenever I can. But I wanted to tell you, you have never changed, and it's very, very positive. But I first met you when you pulled a chair out for me at what is now the Tarrant County Opportunity District. Never will forget that. But I was telling a staffer earlier today how when I went through Leadership Fort Worth, which was probably 2001 or 2, you were planning your first residential component. And what was amazing is that those homes were wired back then. And the staffer, whoever it was, said, boy, they've always been forward thinking, and you have. And so I just think when you look at Tarrant County Opportunity Center, that was part of the abatement package from way back when you all first started. You have paid off not just that area, but the entire city, region, and nation in spades. And so we always owe you a debt of gratitude.
Thank you very much, Gina.
Now, you know where I hang out, just south of you, so I'll expect my little component for my iPad.
No, I just, all I need to do is measure how tall it needs to be to
Okay.
get it right on the podium.
I know who to call. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mike.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks, Mike. I just make a comment. Thanks for all you do. I want to echo what everyone else has said. Sometimes when I get resistance from folks about tax incentives and public-private partnerships and what we do there, I use y'all as an example of the job creation, the growth, the investment in entrepreneurship, and everything else that happens up there. So I just want you to know that, and we're appreciative of all you do for the city. And to something that Councilman Firestone said, I'm just sad you're not in District 3. And actually, the way we're drawing maps, you might be in
We
District
might be,
3.
yeah.
So, yeah, so I'm just kidding, but maybe I'm not, so.
Great, thank you, Michael.
Mike, thank you for being here. We've
Thank
spent
you,
a lot
Mayor.
of time together in the last month or so, specifically working on economic development to continue this trend. But I know it's not part of your presentation today, but I also wanted you to briefly mention Hillwood is not just operating in Alliance, Texas and Fort Worth. You've also got a lot of interest across the city. At a very high level, just tell us how bullish you are on Fort Worth and other sectors of Fort Worth as well.
Well, I told someone today who actually didn't realize I was from Fort Worth and that I'm a Fort Worth native. He thought, because I work for Hillwood, that I must have been, a hired gun. But I told him my answer was, I said, well, I like to think of myself as one of the biggest cheerleaders for the city. I think I tell people, we're just warming up in Fort Worth. We have a lot of growth challenges that we have to manage, and you all, what I sat and listened to today, you all deal with that every day. But I think we might be arguably, even though we're the 12th largest city, maybe the best kept secret in the country. And I think if we manage that growth properly, and if we selectively bring in, quality people, companies, this community should be one of the best cities in the country for a long, long time. So, and there's opportunities everywhere. It's not just, obviously I'm focused on that corridor, but I'm interested in the West Corridor. I'm interested in the Central City. We're doing development in South Fort Worth right now and along 35 and Risinger, talking to a lot of people about different things. I love Fernandez's discussion about Farrington Field with you all bringing in ULI. I think is a great move. They are the intellectual stars of real estate development. They really know how to vision things. So, as you already have, put me to work.
Not letting loose, don't worry. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, thank you.
Council. Okay, now we're moving to our briefing on strategy to reduce violent crime with Chief Neil Noakes, Fort Worth PD. All media rise. They did on cue, like all stood up at the same time.
Thank you so much.
Mayor and council, if I may, before I start, I do want to give a nod, a tip of the hat to Mike Berry and to Hillwood and the Perot family for all they have done, not for just Fort Worth, but for first responders in Fort Worth. And he's right, he's not just investing in a certain area in Fort Worth. I was there for a meeting at the Fort Worth office last week. Ran into a young lady who's with Crystal Ray. She goes to school at Crystal Ray as an intern at Hillwood. They're hiring her to come in and empowering her. They're pouring into her, and they're making a difference in people, not just places. And I appreciate them, Mike, very much for what you do. Thank you. Violent crime is the #1 issue for the Fort Worth Police Department. Violent crime is the #1 issue for me. Even when going through the process, when I threw my hat in the ring to become chief, one of the first questions we were asked is, what is issue #1? What do you want to address first? My answer then and my answer now is violent crime. We've seen, looking across the country, that this is a nationwide problem, but this is something that Fort Worth wants dealt with locally, and we will. We've also seen, looking across the country, quite frankly, my good friend Eddie Garcia in Dallas has had great success with his crime plan. And what we're seeing, the recipe is not that difficult. It comes down to 2 words, really: police and partnerships. First is policing. We need solid, professional, precise, data-driven, intelligence-led policing. We need officers who go out proactively in communities and address the violent actors that are in communities. But it also needs partnerships. Partnerships with social service agencies, partnerships with our educators, partnerships with nonprofits, with private industry, but it also means partnerships with our communities, with our formal and informal community leaders, with our faith leaders. And what we've seen in law enforcement, and we've acknowledged even more and more recently, is Quite frankly, oftentimes the communities that need us the most are the ones that trust us the least. And I want you to know those two things: proactive professional policing and proactive engagement with all communities in Fort Worth has been going on for quite some time. Before I ever even took over as chief, under Chief Krause, it was happening, and we're continuing to do it today. We talked a little bit in the introduction about the national crime trend. This is what we're seeing according to CDC. In 2020, the nation experienced the largest one-year increase in the homicide rate since it began tracking homicides in our country. The complete numbers for 2021 are not yet available, but there's another group called the Council on Criminal Justice that released some information, and they said in large cities, anyway, across the country, there was an additional 7% increase in 2021. We all know that firearm violence affects all of us. These statistics were staggering, though. Firearm-related injuries are among the 5 leading causes of death for people ages 1 to 64 in the United States. But let's drill down a little bit more. And very disturbing here, teens and young adults, 15 to 34 years of age, that's where our homicide rates are the highest. Black, American Indian, Alaska Native, and Hispanic populations are the ones most affected by this violence. If this doesn't catch you off guard, if this doesn't make you upset, I don't know much will. Look at the disparities here. So national firearm homicides broken down by different racial demographics. That tall blue line, black males. The smaller lines closer to me on the right, those are for females, but they mirror relatively closely what you're seeing with males as well. So let's get to Fort Worth. We look at injury and fatal shootings, so that would be our aggravated assaults and our homicides that involve shootings. Here's the numbers we're looking at right here. We got Fort Worth, Dallas, El Paso, some other large cities across the country. If you look between 2019, the blue line, and 2020, the orange line, every city had increased. Homicides in major cities, you'll see the same. Now, one thing that's important to note, because not all the information is available right now, the gray line for 2021 is just up to September 30th. I did get some information from the Major City Chiefs Association recently for the 70 largest agencies in the nation. The trend continued in most large cities, where in 2021 there was actually an increase over 2020. Aggravated assaults, similar. Again, this is only through September 30th of 2021. But looking at the information from the Major City Chiefs Association, again, there were significant increases in aggravated assaults across the country. Robbery was one where we actually saw a bit of a decline. That was the glimmer of hope we saw in many cities across the country, but the numbers are still higher than we want them to be. Now, we've talked a lot over the last couple of years, I've even said it myself, about how we are seeing homicide numbers that are the highest we've seen in more than a quarter of a century, and that is true. One homicide is too many. But one thing I think we need to do is give some context to that number. So what this chart shows is our crime rate in Fort Worth from 1990 to 2021, along with our population growth, 1990 to 2021. As you can see with the blue line, and as you all know at this table, population has been significantly growing for many years. But you'll also see that the crime rate has been dropping. What was interesting when I looked at this is our population has more than doubled since 1990. Now let's drill down a little bit more though, talk about more recent numbers from 2010 to 2020, and that will show where that increase started. You see the line consistently dropping to 2019, and we see the uptick in 2020, 2019 into 2020. Another number shows, again, 118 homicides is what we saw last year. That's too high. But the numbers aren't, relatively speaking, as significant when it comes to our population as they were in the 90s. One thing that's never lost on the Fort Worth Police Department is every victim is significant. So here are our shootings from 2006 through 2021. Again, an important note here is we've increased the way we are able to more accurately report shootings. We changed that in 2020. So the numbers 2006 from 2019, a lot of digging into narratives, a lot of data mining had to be done, where now, as of 2020, it's a simple box to be checked in the report. So we're tracking them more efficiently than we had before. So the numbers we do believe are higher in 2020 and 2021 versus other years, but probably not as significant as this shows because we have more robust data reporting now. 2021 Fort Worth fatal shootings, 94. These are with firearms. 294 with injuries. Another staggering statistic you'll see here. So I'm going to show you two slides. One will show 2021 Fort Worth shooting victim data. The next one will show Fort Worth shooting arrestee data, meaning the ones involved in the crime that are actually shooting. And the numbers are quite similar. So the age of most of our shooting victims, 92%, are adult. 86% are male. And here's where real disparity jumps out, 62% African American. So a population that makes up roughly 19% of our city accounts for 62% of our victims of gun violence. Here are the arrestees, 93% adult, 88% male, 67% African American. One of the things we use as a tool to find where we need to address our resources, to strategically and thoughtfully place our resources where they're most needed, are hotspot maps. This shows in 2021 where our shootings are most occurring in the city of Fort Worth. So we started back in May 11th, an initiative called Fort Worth Safe. What we wanted to make sure citizens of Fort Worth knew is there was a lot of proactive police work already going on, a lot of community engagement already going on. We wanted to make sure they knew what we were doing. We wanted to be transparent in our efforts. What we did was create a website link on our traditional website to a Fort Worth Safe site where citizens could go, look at our heat maps, look at the strategies we're using in neighborhoods, look at the neighborhoods we're going to and why, and see the results of the initiative. Here were the hotspot locations we were looking at during our Fort Worth Safe initiative, which was May 11th through September 11th. They mirror what you saw earlier from our shootings across the city. Here are some of the results of the Fort Worth Safe initiative. We had over 671 arrests, most of which were felony arrests. 234 weapons were confiscated, 104 gang members were arrested. And this is not all arrest activity in Fort Worth. This was just the officers dedicated to the Fort Worth Safe initiative. We use that data-driven, intelligence-led, technology-driven strategy we talked about earlier. When we went and made stops, we went and encountered people. It was because we already knew through the data we had, the intelligence we had, the cameras we had, that someone was in a stolen vehicle, was selling drugs, was in possession of a firearm, maybe all three. And one thing I want to make sure everyone knows about is our gun violence investigations team, which we started at the beginning of last year. We found that many of our shooters who were committing homicides were also committing non-fatal shootings. But something was unfair to the detectives that were tasked with working those cases. They were the same detectives working all the general assignment cases in our divisions. Their caseloads are massive. They did not have the time to dedicate to those cases like those cases deserved. Not their fault, but those cases needed more attention. So we created a team that investigates non-fatal shootings the same way we investigate homicides. When this team was put in place, the clearance rate for non-fatal shootings was right around 20% for Fort Worth. Since this team has been put in place, our clearance rate is now 60% and climbing. I'm speechless when I look at this slide because this looks like something a military unit would use. I want to be very clear about something. I am not anti-Second Amendment, but I am all about responsible, lawful gun ownership. And there are people in our neighborhoods carrying weapons like this that do not need to have those weapons, period. I don't care where you stand on that issue. The issue is some people do not need to have these weapons because they're killing one another with them. You have citizens who see these in their neighborhoods. You have Fort Worth police officers who every single day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, go out in communities knowing this may be what they encounter, but they continue doing it every single day. And Mayor, I want to point out here, thank you for your vocal support of the police department. You have no idea how much that support means to me personally. It means to the officers of the Fort Worth Police Department. They need that encouragement, they need that support, and coming directly from the top, it means a great deal. This is some of what we did with Fort Worth Safe in addition to our law enforcement efforts. Because I said, it's not an either or initiative, it's both. It's an and initiative. We have the law enforcement efforts and the community efforts. As the mayor says, you can be pro-police and pro-community at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. Very intentional, very robust effort about going out into the community, connecting with residents, businesses, organizations who serve the community, letting them know what we're doing and why we're doing it. We even created a Fort Worth Safe business card with a QR code on the back to make it very easy to go to the site to see exactly what we're doing. It was a level of transparency I don't think we've had with any of our initiatives before. Our gang unit was critical to this, but it wasn't just the enforcement. You see at the bottom, no less than 158 guns taken off the streets just by the gang unit. But they also are involved in Boys and Girls Clubs, community centers, very involved with ISDs in the area, engaging with children, mentoring and coaching, doing what they can to prevent and intervene when you have some children who are at risk of becoming parts of gangs themselves. Community Safety Partnership is a group we started last year with CCPD funds to fund officers who actually are going a little bit deeper. We all have our MPOs that do a phenomenal work, incredible work. What the Community Safety Partnership does, it dives a little deeper into our youth mentoring programs like Operation Progress, PAL, different school programs. They also partner with groups like LVT Rise to help pour into and support the communities. During the summer of 2021, they put together a 3-day camp, and 100 young people from Fort Worth participated. Were able to take a tour of TCU. It was a really great day. They loved it. This next summer, we're looking at doing the same thing at Texas Wesleyan. We increased the dollar figure that we commit to our partners with a shared mission when it comes to CCPD funds, to partner with groups who, like us, want to do something about violent crime, but they approach it from a different direction to prevent and intervene. And here's what the budget looked like for us. It's very important for us to stay within the budget the best we possibly can. So it's a reallocation of resources. For instance, some of our specialized units, they will change their days off. They will change the hours they work to be able to address the violent crime based on the trends that we're seeing. In addition to that, we had officers that would come in for overtime, and between the general fund and CCPD funds, we spent just under $369,000 in overtime just for our violent crime initiative efforts. This is a very important slide for me because what I want you to realize, even though the initiative, Fort Worth Safe, it went from May 11th to September 11th. That was just the first phase of our initiative to address violent crime. It did not stop. We did not hit pause. It has continued. From September 12th, the day after the first phase of Fort Worth Safe ended, our numbers are even going up. Again, more targeted, precise arrests of violent actors in our neighborhoods, more weapons confiscated and taken off the streets, and the majority, if you'll notice there, of the 992 arrests, 639 were felony arrests. Violence prevention starts at home, let's be honest. It does. Violence prevention starts with families. We're doing what we can to help pour into families, invest in communities, and I've said many times before, we will never arrest our way out of crime, but please understand, we will be in neighborhoods and we will be arresting the violent actors who are committing these crimes in our neighborhoods. We're gonna be working more with violence intervention and prevention groups, working more with grassroots organizations. We're working with our lawmakers, our district attorney's office, judges in Tarrant County. It's an all hands on deck approach. Here's what we'll do moving forward. We're going to continue to use the same technology that has led us to be more precise and specific in our details. We're going to look at a temporary unit where we bring in multiple resources from multiple units within the Fort Worth Police Department to focus specifically on violent crime and, more importantly, gun crime in the city of Fort Worth. We're going to continue to engage community members and seek input from community members and partner with those leaders in the community that I talked about earlier. Our direct response unit has been critical in dealing with this and responding to our camera activations and notifications about stolen vehicles, about vehicles related to wanted felons, and about people we've seen on camera with guns and drugs at convenience stores, game rooms, and places right in our neighborhoods. Continuing to work with our crime analysts to gather that intelligence, work with our gang units on enforcement as well as prevention, intervention, and all of our other units within the Fort Worth Police Department who have already been working on this problem. They're going to continue to do so. We'll continue to partner with our community members through our NPOs and other groups within the communities that we serve. We're planning on spending about another $370,000 from our budgets, meaning general and CCPD, to cover the overtime that we're needed, so we're working within the budget we have. We're very fortunate to have many federal partners who are working with us. We've partnered with federal, state, county, and local partners to make sure we're bringing all resources to bear. We're working with the U.S. Attorney's Office on prosecutions for many gun cases. We're starting up another Project Safe Neighborhoods program with the FBI. We're working with our ATF too to address rogue gun dealers. We have to make sure those who are selling the guns are doing it legally. Recently, President Biden mentioned some potential grant funding for community policing and violence intervention programs. We are very proactively looking into those possibilities as well. Before we get into questions, if I may, I can't stress enough just how much your Fort Worth Police Department does every single day to support this effort. I'm talking about the officers that are out every day. I'm talking about our civilian employees who oftentimes work behind the scene with no expectation of any kind of recognition for the hard work they do. I'm talking about our volunteers who are out there every single day, but also our partners with a shared mission, our community members. We talked before, I mentioned oftentimes the people, the communities, the neighborhoods that need our help the most are the ones that trust us the least. We were very proactive about that as well. Actually, I'd like to ask my friend to step up to the podium, please. So, received a call recently from a friend of mine who's part of the Baptist Ministers Union. And he said, Chief, we want to be part of the solution. We want to help. We understand that the police can't do this alone. The community cannot do this alone. Let's sit down and talk. So we were able to go out and meet in Mount Olive and talk about some options, talk about things that we could do. What I want you to know, this gentleman right here, Pastor Parrish E. Lowry with Greater Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, is a leader, not just in the faith community. He's a leader in the city of Fort Worth. He's someone who cares about the community. He's someone who wants to see things done to empower and give back to the community, but he's not one to just talk about it. He's one who wants to get something done. I consider it an honor to call him a friend. I'll ask him to come up just briefly to talk about what he sees the role of the faith leaders and men like him in the community in addressing violent crime. Pastor Lowry.
Thank you, Chief, Mayor, Council, Department leaders. It's an honor to be before you. I'll be brief. It actually came about in my garage. I was preparing for Sunday service. I received a call from some other pastors educating me on what was going on in our community. I was very disheartened. Not only do I represent the Baptist Ministers Union as the president and all that good stuff and a pastor, but I'm also a business owner here in our city, part owner of Tree of Life Funeral Directors. And when I received this call, I was actually going back to the funeral home that afternoon, that evening, to discover one of those individuals that I received the call on was on our table. I want to stay in business, but not that way. And I was very troubled at the fact that no one was saying anything about our young black men being murdered. And so it took on the task to contact Chief to just give him my insight and to educate me on what we were up against. And so we want to be involved in that, not only just from a community level, but also from a business level, but also from a clergy standpoint. So we have agreed to get involved in the grassroots programs. We have agreed to get involved in prevention programs. Also, to bringing exposure to our young people, to educate them on that there is a better way. So I want to commend Chief for his work. I think the world of him. I think we have a chief that has a heart for the people. So I challenge this council, this city, to give our police department all of our support because they need it. It's not just them. It's going to take all of us. So thank you for hearing me. I only paid for an hour and a half of parking. So I do need to know if I'm ticketed, who do I? Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop.
And ladies and gentlemen, that's how change happens. I'll be happy to take any questions now.
Go ahead, Jared.
Thank you, Chief, for this presentation. I'm a bit emotional right now. I've been to one too many funerals of kids getting caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time, making the wrong decisions. The data you showed that kids and young adults are making those wrong decisions. And the data you also showed was that black men, black boys are committing bad decisions with guns for our teens that have guns. And got a call last week, right? Kids at Texas Can Academy, outside of school, classes exchanging. Kid gets pulled in his car, into someone else's car by kids, gets beat up, pistol whipped, thrown out the car, and they start shooting out the car. As a black man who grew up in this community, as a black man who has 2 black boys as nephews, I can't imagine myself nor my nephews being in that situation, and I recognize that it's important that we train up children. When I see your strategies, thank you for the service that y'all do. Something is uneasy about me as an elected official at this table for the city I love so much. We can't arrest our black boys to get out of this. And I think that it's important as a community that we're training up children. And you're right, it takes all of us doing that. Some of the things that I lose sleep over, one, where do our teenagers get guns from? You talked about that today, and bear with me, I'm going through this thought process just to offer encouragement, but also to offer challenges that we may not have the solutions yet, but this needs to be the #1 priority. How do our kids get guns? I also see, and I've heard from folks that I really trust that are doing this work alongside you, that when they look in some of these kids' eyes, They've seen kids living in a community, in an opportunity desert, and they don't see anything in their eyes, no hope, right? And I believe that as a city, we have an opportunity to address opportunity deserts. We talk about McCartan, Alta Mesa, and that's one of those areas, right? And I think that there's work to be done, yes, in policing, and also families and children want hope and opportunities to thrive in their neighborhoods. And when we don't, as a city, and not saying we don't, but when we don't prioritize that, we create conditions of despair in our communities of color. The other thing I thought about growing up, where do Black boys and kids learn conflict resolution? What we see in District 6 is kids get in a fight in school, no resources to resolve the conflict in school. It boils out into the community. One example, a 13-year-old girl in my district got shot in the head in a park. I say these things because I think, yes, we're doing a lot of great things. And you said it best, one life is too many, especially for our teenagers. And I'm really rallying. I'm asking for help. I've asked for help, right? And you've answered that call. But I think there's intentional ways that before it comes to arresting a Black boy, putting him in jail, and furthering that opportunity desert, that there are things that we can do for our middle school students and high school students. In our neighborhood committee, Chris brought up an amazing point about what are we doing for our middle school and high school students. In District 6, there's not a place for a teenager to go. Thank God this table made the bold decision, right, to create opportunities for kids to go to community center. But how do we attract our teenagers, right, into those community centers now that we've removed the financial barrier? Right, so there's some things that not just PD, but this entire table, and this entire city staff, we have brilliant minds, brilliant hearts in this community and in this city that we can make reducing teen violence our top priority, and not just arresting our way out of it, but creating hope and opportunity in the lives of our young Black boys, isolating race, because that's what the data is showing. And we need to do initiatives that are specific to that, right? I don't have the ideas yet, but I say all this to say that we have to get very clear and very specific on the reality that our Black boys are losing opportunity and hope and making bad decisions that are ruining their life and creating generational cycles. And so I am challenging this table to figure it out. And I don't know what that looks like just yet, but I'm in.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Chris, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. First, I want to open up and say, and I appreciate the comments, and I think it's in order to give accolades to the mayor, basically being pro-police and pro-community. But Chief, I do want to highlight, I don't think anyone around this table don't support the police. And I don't think you meant that, you weren't saying intention, but I want to make a knowledge that we all support the police. And we want to make sure that the police is policing correctly. And so I want to say that again. I support the police. I truly believe, and I'm certainly committed to making sure that all issues are correctly founded. I have a couple of questions for you in the presentation. You highlighted in the presentation hotspots. And I don't know if you can pull that slide back up. And so when I ask this question, because I know we have CCPD funding, and I know that we are using our CCPD funding, but my question is, when you look at these hotspots and you see the red as the highest, are we using adequately CCPD funding in those specific hotspots location? Are there groups that we are funding and supporting in those? And I know this is a new presentation, but could you answer that question?
Yes, sir, that's a great question. And if I may, before I answer that, yes, I do understand this council supports the Fort Worth Police Department. I've said many times how there aren't not many similarly sized cities across the country where you're going to see the kind of support the police department here gets from the community and from the leaders of this city that sit around this table. So thank you for making that distinction. I appreciate that, and you're absolutely right. And we appreciate that support very much. I can confidently say that we are focusing our CCPD-funded resources in the areas where they are most needed, in some of the community centers, in the schools. We are pouring as much as we can into the areas where it's needed the most, so we get the most bang for our buck, if you will.
Okay. And this may be a future agenda item. I would actually like to see itemized accounts to support that answer you just given. As we move forward, I think that we want to channel our resources to these areas that are affected the most. The next point I want to make is you so eloquently and specifically highlight the different races, the age groups, the areas, the types of crimes. But when it got to resolutions, it was broad. We're going to work with the churches. We're going to work with the grassroots. My question is one word: how? I think you need to, as you adequately, you got that bracket, we need to have a bracket to show we're going to work with the grassroots on this and this. And I know we might still be finding that information, but we just can't be broad when it comes to resolution, and we have specific issues. And so I think we need to take the nail, put it in the coffin, and drill until it's over. And I, for one, would sit, this issue is bigger than just today. So that issue may be a group of us coming together, it may be a committee, it may be a task force, I don't know. But we, if guns is the issue, then we need to drill in. And so and I know you don't have that answer today, but I think my challenges to you is, how do we incorporate grassroots movement? Because we had a meeting the other day, and there are several different types of grassroots movements, and each of them operate differently, or they are associated or want some different type of resource. Some are protesters, some are working with Black young men, some are working with Black young girls, and I think when you put that slide up, and the biggest issue is Black men and boys, and we need to really home in on those grassroots people so that we can make the connection.
One thing I can do is I can provide, if the council would so desire, a list of those organizations that we're actually working with, the communities that they are impacting, to give you a little more information about specifically where the coaching, the mentoring, the intervention, the prevention is actually happening. And as far as drilling down, you're absolutely right. We want to drill down as much as we can to these specific people and these specific places. We're finalizing an agreement right now with TCU. One thing that I've seen several different agencies do across the country, one in Dallas with Chief Garcia, was partner with an outside entity, a respected academic institution that would help us drill down. Show us from an outside perspective, Fort PD, this is what you're doing right, this is what you need to do more of, or this is something maybe you should try, and this is an area where you should focus it. Because sometimes maybe we get so into our own data, we need somebody to give us an outside perspective. We are getting that outside perspective, and once we're able to drill down even more, I would love to come back and show you even more information if you would like.
I would certainly appreciate that.
Go ahead, Carlos.
Thank you for the presentation, Chief. I'm not going to drill down to too much minutia, but like most police departments around the country, we're left scratching our proverbial heads to find the real cause, behind the uptick in gun-related violence. In your opinion, does our rate of increase in violent crimes involving firearms closely mirror those that we've seen on the national trend for major cities?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, there are a lot of theories around there, right? One theory that's kind of been bandied out a lot is the increase in the purchase of firearms, that uptick, here during the pandemic around the March timeframe. But that doesn't really sufficiently explain what happened, 3 months later. And this is leading to my next point. Even though there were in excess of 2 million purchases between March and May, still doesn't explain it. So gun ownership doesn't sufficiently answer that question.
Correct.
Okay. Like I support the Second Amendment, and having responsible gun ownership and use, of firearms, is imperative. But I want to point out too, this is why I asked that prior question, our preventative and focused crime prevention measures, taken by Fort Worth PD. I was trying to ascertain, maybe quantitatively, if that maybe perhaps helped keep our crime rate from being higher.
If what did?
From being higher.
Yeah, but are you asking, did what help keep it from going higher?
What I'm saying is, those focused, crime prevention efforts.
Okay,
by
yes,
Fort Worth
sir.
PD, would you say, in your opinion, that they helped keep our crime rate down from being much higher?
I believe so, yes.
Okay. All right. And I don't know if you have this statistic, but in general, the gun-related crimes here in Fort Worth, what percentage would you say are from firearms that were obtained illegally?
I don't have that statistic, but I can say that it would be a significant number, but I don't know off the top of my head what that figure would be.
Okay. And that goes back to your point about responsible gun ownership, because, purchase of a weapon in the proper way shows that responsibility.
Correct.
But thank you, Chief. And I
Yes, sir.
appreciate your department's efforts. And then on one side note, I can say this to the council, there is one group that is engaged, in the north side, trying to address gun violence there, and they've been meeting with groups. It's called ACT. So if y'all want more information, ask your MPOs about that.
Thanks, Carlos. Gina?
Thank you, Chief. Very thorough report, great information. Thank you for bringing it. And I know how you met Pastor Parrish at Mount Olive. Mayor, he's a son of Pastor Glenn. So that same spirit of working with community is very important, and I think our own Reverend Nettles got him to give the prayer for tonight, so he's been with us most of the day. I've got three chest bumping.
Yeah, he's definitely got a ticket. Yeah.
Go pay his ticket, we can get him back in here. One question I have, Chief, and this comes from my Facebook Live audience, just so you know, is the proliferation of guns and the removal of license to carry in Texas making things worse? I know you don't have data, but would like your opinion on that. And after you answer that, I have another question for you involving, what do you call it, workforce diversity.
You're right, Mayor Pro Tem, I do not have that data. I wish I could provide that to you, but I don't have any data on how it's affected one way or the other.
So at some point, maybe the study, if we put together this task force like Councilman Nettles recommended, we can let that be one of our data points that we take a look at. Because I would hope that we could see a tie-in. There's got to be something and a tie-in to help us get out of this hole that we're in. The second question involving workforce diversity. When it comes to game rooms, specifically on Rosedale in my district, we finally were able to get the owner of Smokies to cry uncle. But it could have happened sooner, I'm told, had we had more African-American vice officers. And so talk about diversity and how you think increasing diversity may help with the stats that we're showing. I think when it comes to having a diverse workforce, we know from data that does work. It does help any kind of situation, including crime, I would hope. So where are we with that? How do your officers look in terms of those who can go in somewhere undercover and people not know who they are because everybody knows the 2 or 3 you might have in vice?
That's a wonderful question. That's a conversation I had with Council Member Nettles recently, and it's oftentimes when it comes to diversity in, say, specialized units for a police department, there are 2 schools of thought. One is you hire the best person for the job, period. The other school of thought is, well, you have to consider diversity. To me, those are not mutually exclusive. Those are really the same thing, because if you have a unit, let's say our vice unit, it's made up of entirely, say, white males, that limits our ability to do our job. So for me, when I'm looking at someone to put in a unit, it's not just someone who's qualified. Yes, they need to be qualified, but it's someone who brings something to that unit that makes it better than they were without them. And then oftentimes we're seeing that is bringing in diversity into a unit. So maybe we need someone who speaks Spanish, because there are certain communities, certain businesses we can't go into unless that officer speaks Spanish and is able to communicate the way everyone else there does. Diversity is critical. We're being very intentional about making sure those units are being diversified. We are holding off on a lot of the spots right now because we are trying to focus more on keeping our patrol staffing numbers up. But as more academy classes are coming out, as we're going to be putting more officers in these specialized units, diversity is going to be a key component of selecting the people that go to those units.
One thing you know that this council, even the previous council, has been very committed to assisting in your efforts to recruit. You know, I'm pretty sure you'd still get the kind of support that we offered before, the videos that we did before. I think there are ideas in your department that are more effective than even the officers who come up with the ideas realize themselves. And so I would suggest taking a look at the junior billboards. I know that we did get some billboards in place this time, but not necessarily junior billboards, which are often in the inner city communities. And so, but luckily, I put Officer Swearingen in touch with Clear Channel, and we were able to get some billboards. My question to you, criminals don't operate 9 to 5. But for the most part, you know, NPOs have a schedule that is pretty much daytime. I've got several activities that take place in my district between midnight and 5 a.m. Talk about the handoff, you know, involving NPOs and that cop who's on the street at night. And the last question I'll ask you will be about how do you get people to take breaks where criminal activity is taking place, because I've seen it work before at Marshall Grains and Kell Cleaners. So those are 2 questions, and I'll silence myself.
One thing I want to say is NPOs oftentimes don't get credit for the things that they do. I know when I was the commander of North Division, we would have the NPOs up there when they saw there was a crime trend in the middle of the night on the weekends. They would work in the middle of the night on the weekends. And what was also really impressive to see, it wasn't just the officers. We would have our Code Blue members come out, our volunteers that would come out and help be our eyes and our ears on those details. When the NPOs aren't able to do that, that's where communication is absolutely key. And that's communication between the NPO and the beat officers in that area, between the NPOs and our specialized units like our gang unit, directed response, narcotics, our vice unit, who can direct the resources that we need at the times we need it in the areas that we need them. Because you're right, we can't have an NPO there 24/7. They do adjust their schedules frequently, but they communicate frequently with those beat officers to make sure the resources are where they need to be.
That last raggedy question, years ago when we were having trouble with the homeless, you know, just camping out wherever they chose, especially at Marshall Grains, when Marshall Grains relocated, and Kell Cleaners in Hanley. And so I asked the officers, you know, take your break there. And just the presence of a police car, we saw that problem go away. Is that mindset still something that's entertained now? Because since we know where the hot spots are, you know, what can we do, but also keeping officers safe at the same time so that they're not ambushed?
Absolutely. One of the things we're really instilling in officers is the beat mentality, taking care of their neighborhood, taking care of the area to which they're assigned. And that means if you have time between calls, go sit if you have to do a report. Say there's burglaries in the parking lot of a business, go sit in that parking lot to do your report. Be visible, be seen, be a deterrent when you can, and go make sure that we make sure the information in roll calls and through emails is provided to those beat officers and NPOs so they know where to go to be seen, to be that deterrent. Thank you.
Elizabeth and then Carrie.
I appreciate you recognizing that this is a national trend and what it means for Fort Worth. I want to reiterate that I don't love other cities in this nation. My constituents don't live in other cities in this nation. They live in Fort Worth. And so I want to make sure that we are not hiding behind, well, this is a problem for everyone. My challenge to you, my charge to you, Chief, is to be the national leader, to be innovative, to do those things that are daring, that I've heard you talk about so many times before, and implement those so that when we look at our crime stats, when other cities look to us, we are that example, and we are taking care of those of our community here first. And so I wanted to talk to you about those numbers. I appreciate the crime stats that you gave us, but they were a little hard to chew on because we see Houston has, dramatically higher numbers than we do, but their populations also double what ours are. And so I did some rough math, and I'm no Carrie Moon, but I do have some numbers, and I was sad to see how we shake out when you control for population. And we're not, we've got Dallas and Houston are consistently in front of us, but then when it comes to those other cities that you showed on your chart, we're lagging behind. Our murder rates are higher, our shootings are higher. And the one city that really stood out was El Paso. Our murder rate was 9.9-ish per 1,000 or 100,000 people, and El Paso's was 2.7. Likewise, their fatality shooting rate. Ours was 41.8 and theirs was 7.04. And so let's find out what they're doing. There's a lot of rhetoric about how our borders aren't safe, but it looks to me like El Paso's a pretty safe community to live. So I'd like to know what they're doing to have, numbers, and I want to see our numbers look like theirs as well. And so I saw a lot on here, but I didn't see a lot of specifics. And so what I want to know is this new unit that we're establishing with the DRU and the gang and the vice. I think on its face, it seems like a great idea, but can you give me some more examples of exactly how they're going to get out in front of this violence? We could put folks in a room together. We can put us in a room together, and sometimes we work really well and really efficiently at getting some stuff done, and then sometimes we try to draw maps, and we're here all day. So, how exactly are they going to, tell me a little bit more about what that's going to look like, how they're going to operate.
We were talking earlier about one of the key things in dealing with crime in neighborhoods is that communication between MPOs and the beat officers. Communication is key with all units. Sometimes having people in the same room at the same table having the same conversations helps. One of the best predictors of the success of any relationship, any detail is proximity. If we get people around one another, information flows much better. And when we have people who are experts in various areas of law enforcement, various strategies, we have the intel unit embedded with our narcotics unit saying, this is what we're seeing, this is where we're seeing it, these are our top 10 violent offenders. We bring all resources to bear with the full weight of the resources of the Fort Worth Police Department on the people that specifically need it, not on a neighborhood, not even on a block necessarily, but on the people that are actually committing the crime. That allows us to be more specific and detailed in who we're dealing with. And if I may, going back to your earlier comment, if at any point it appeared I was trying to hide behind the numbers, that was not the intent at all. It was to share information the best I possibly could. And I definitely agree with you, council member. We tend to follow oftentimes in law enforcement best standards. We don't want to just follow best standards in Fort Worth. We want to set best standards. We want to be the city that other cities look to say, hey, what are they doing? Like you just said, wow, look what El Paso's doing. I want people to look at Fort Worth and say the same thing. I agree 100%.
And so let me offer myself, and I think I can speak for everyone at this table, as a resource. PD is not a silo, just like no other department in this city is a silo. We all have to share information and resources to make sure that we're doing what we need to. So whether it's a street that needs additional lighting, a park that needs additional security, a block or a neighborhood that needs some improvement, that's where we can come in and be your resource. And so I'd also like to just a friendly reminder that we're here. And use us, because that's our job. That's what we were elected to do. And Councilman Nettles said it earlier, we all support your efforts. And we want to make sure that our communities are as safe as possible. And we can add a little elbow grease to that. So don't forget that we're here to help in that physical environment, that recreational environment, to be that conduit into our communities, to help you get a better reduce our violent crime.
Thank you for that.
Carrie.
Chief, just overall, obviously, we all talk about a lot of issues every Tuesday, whether it be water or redistricting or budgets, but there's or traffic, but there's no greater impact we can have to an individual resident in Fort Worth than public safety. And we are seeing, the specific minute challenges with crime and homicide rates and aggravated assaults in certain areas that are affected more in Fort Worth than other areas. And, first I'll start with, we have to aggressively be responsible and correct that. And so I appreciate you coming forth. I do want to say that I'm, you know that you have the support of mayor and council and the citizens of Fort Worth. Since 2018, there is, I'll put the city of Fort Worth's record up against anybody, any other city, with the measures that we as a mayor and council have taken to improve policing. And that's adding the crisis intervention teams, the de-escalation training, banning chokeholds, diversity recruitment, crime prevention programs, overwhelmingly voting to renew our CCTV funding of $90 million a year, 65 to 35%, completely silencing any defund police activists. We showed that the support is there for police. And it's time for y'all to stay. This is the last metric that we have, that we've got to show that we're putting the dollars in there and that there's a positive result for the people that are mostly impacted by this violent crime. So you've heard the support at the table. You've seen it the last 4 years. If you need to put cameras in neighborhoods, let's put cameras in neighborhoods. You heard us talking about license plate tags and trying to make our policy more strict and support for that. Just every week, you're going to hear the support. Every year you see the support. I commend you for your efforts. We know the metrics that we've got to improve upon. And let's go out there and fight crime and make Fort Worth safe for all residents in the city of Fort Worth.
Michael.
Thanks, Chief. I'm not going to belabor points that have already been made. I will say this. Said it before, that our number one job is to keep our citizens safe. The people around this table, it's our number one job, mayor and council, to make sure we're giving you the tools and you have the tools to keep citizens safe, and our job to do that. So I want to commend you on the results from the SAFE program you put in place here and what we've seen. It's not lost on me for District 3. The two places are Como area and Las Vegas Trail, the two underserved, underrepresented parts of District 3, that the crime is happening there. And I've heard you say, too, we're not going to rest our way out of this problem, that we've got it in program. So I mirror what's also around the table of finding creative ways to help those underserved, underrepresented parts. And we're doing some great things and spend a lot of time in those parts of the neighborhood, parts of the city to do that. Last week, I went and visited the Real-Time Crime Center. I would say if anybody around this table hasn't gone, go see it. It is enlightening to understand the information that we have and that what your officers are trying to do. I also know that we don't have enough officers to follow up with all the issues that we know are out there as we pulled up things on cameras across the city. So I would say you again have the support around the people around this table, and I think the citizens of Fort Worth, to make sure we're addressing everything we can, that the crime that we know exists, and keep handling that. One thing I will say, it's talked about, the neighborhoods, in my opinion, are the backbone of the city. And one of the biggest tools our neighborhoods have is the neighborhood patrol officers that we've talked about. And what I would say, if I would also like to see in this next budget that comes through, if not sooner, that we figure out a way to expand that program. I think that you get out in front of a lot of the problems that you know, and some that have been referenced here, access to community centers, et cetera. It's just that touch that happens in the community. And I'm watching in the far west of Fort Worth as the growth is happening, the beats and beats for those guys get bigger, and men and women get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so I don't think you can really drill down to the problems in the neighborhoods if those men and women are taxed to the level that they are at this point. So that would be my push too, as a tool we know we have now in our tool belt to help decrease crime in the neighborhoods, because they're on top of it. Thank you.
Chief, I participated in a call yesterday with U.S. Conference of Mayors. It was led actually by Mayor Lightfoot in Chicago, Phoenix, and myself, and Kansas City. And every American city is at a defining moment right now. And we're no different than that. You could point to a lot of things that are positives for Fort Worth, but you can also, as Elizabeth pointed out, some things that are negative when you compare us to some other Texas cities. I do think very strongly that a pro-police, pro-community model is really necessary, because you also have American cities, it was brought up to us yesterday, where you have officers that are fleeing the job. You cannot recruit and retain top talent, and that's who really is combating this problem. We don't have that problem in Fort Worth right now, fortunately, but we have to recognize that we have other cities here in Texas that are facing that difficulty. I think there are also some really significant issues in our neighborhoods that maybe you're not able to talk about openly right now. But I encourage our council members to specifically sit down with you and drill down. And then also at a future CCPD meeting, let's drill into how those funds are utilized, and especially with our community partners, because there may be some that are missing that each of you have worked with. You want to make sure at their table, even if it's smaller. And then lastly, I've had some conversations with middle school administrators and high school administrators lately that really need the assistance more so than we might be giving right now. And that's across the entire city, not even just in our hot spots. So that is a follow-up item that we could conduct, and probably in each council district, as something for them to have their voices heard, because some of it's not just violent crime. They're seeing things from their students they haven't seen before, especially with mental health and these kids coming out of COVID. So all in all, I'm proud that you're our police chief. I think you're doing a phenomenal job, as all your officers are as well. And we have our work cut out for us around this table to make sure we're rolling up our sleeves as well to help you. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Okay. We're going to go to the update on solid waste fund sustainability with Brandon Bennett.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Before Brandon takes the microphone, I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments before we start talking about the Solid Waste Fund. We started looking at this fund several years ago when we looked at fiscal projections that had the fund in the red. The Solid Waste team worked with Scott Pasternak, who is here with Burns and McDonnell. He's in our audience here. He worked with the Solid Waste team to do a thorough fund review. They looked at our fee structure. We haven't looked at residential rates, I don't think, since 2006. We also looked at the life of the landfill. I know that's a conversation that Mayor and Council, y'all want to be able to have around this table as we look at how much life is left at our landfill. We worked with Scott and his team to understand who was bringing in waste to the landfill, whether it was Fort Worth waste or other cities bringing waste in. We looked at our residential collection contract with Waste Management. And we also brought a plan to Mayor and Council to fix the fund and get it back to a point where it had a positive fund balance and was able to meet its minimum reserve requirement. We instituted some new revenues with the fiscal year 21 budget. We didn't get the budget in for the whole year for our new fees. We had been hoping that the fee structures that we introduced would get the fund back to a positive state. We were in front of this Mayor and Council last September to provide an update that the fees that we introduced were not enough to get the fund back to a positive state and able to meet the reserve requirement. So we are back here again, and we have a plan to present that will bring the solid waste fund back into a healthy state. Brandon and his team are going to give a brief history of the fund, guiding principles we use when we're talking about the fund. Some of the challenges, again, and then some revenue options that will bring the fund back to a positive fund balance and able to meet the minimum reserve requirement. Brandon.
Thank you, Valerie. Are there any questions? So I'm going to make this quick and entertaining. You know it isn't going to happen, but all right. A lot of new faces around the table, so we wanted to give you a little bit of history. The fund itself was adopted in 1982. Prior to 82, actually prior to that time period right in there, that, you dug a hole and you put your garbage in the ground. and there wasn't a whole lot of regulation. And then getting into the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, we started to see some development of federal and state mandates. And we looked as an organization and said, look, these are going to have costs. So let's set up a fund to collect revenues so that we can handle things that come our way. And then also environmentally safe and compliant waste collection, and then progressive solid waste services. City of Fort Worth is still known in Texas and regionally as being a very progressive city when it comes to these things. Overall, in the fund, we have some guiding principles. These are important. You know, that's how you start out your day. You know, what are the things that matter most? We want to, of course, identify proper funding source for adding programs. We have a solid waste plan, a comprehensive solid waste plan that has some costs attached to it. We need to identify the best way to fund those costs and to identify which of those improvements matters most. And so we do that as part of the annual budget process, but we also do it in this context as making sure that we right size who we're charging, how much we're charging, and what we do with that money. We want to seek to generate additional revenue from commercial entities. So if you look back, you know, prior to 2010, that was prior to solid waste being moved into code compliance, it was heavily focused on residential only. All the revenues came in through residential, all the programs were residential, everything was residential. And when it moved over to code, that's when we developed the comprehensive solid waste plan. And we said, look, our landfill is filling up, not just with residential waste, but commercial waste. And when you look at protecting the environment, we need to make sure that we're looking at all waste. Not just the residential waste. And so I'll, in the slide presentation, I'll go through some of the things that we've developed on that and some of the things that we're looking at moving forward. And then we want to exhaust potential revenue options before pursuing a residential rate increase. This is not unusual. I have had the benefit of running solid waste programs in other cities, having been in the solid waste arena for 30-some years, and I will tell you that in almost every city in America, particularly those that have franchise agreements, that commercial and industrial waste helps subsidize residential waste programs. And so when we took our focus away from residential only, that then put a spotlight on what some of our commercial and industrial options or opportunities were, and that's a big part of the presentation at the end. And then we want to preserve and extend the life of our landfill. More on that, a couple of slides. And then we want to make sure that we have a long-term funding, sustainable funding program for the fund. There's a lot of things that have impacted the fund. So I don't want to jump to conclusions or anybody. Give me a chance to kind of explain how we got here and how we're going to get out of it. So from a solid waste fund challenge, you know, there's a bunch of bullet points here, but I'm going to talk about the residential fees. It can be somewhat misleading. If you look at our revenue, about 90% of the revenue in the fund comes from the fees that our residents pay. But about 90% of the expenses in the fund are tied to residential collection. What happens at the curb, what happens at the drop-off stations, and then those things that support it. What has happened over time is that we've added to those primary services different investigative programs like illegal dumping and litter. We've added street sweeping and then homeless camp abatement. Homeless camp abatement is a big one where that was a very little impact on the fund 10 years ago. Now, as you guys got a report not too long ago, it's pretty significant. So when we talk about, what's a primary and what's a secondary service, so if you look at the residential collections, we have about just shy of 250,000 households that we service weekly. We do the curbside collection of garbage, recycling, and yard waste once a week. We do the bulk once a month, and then we have the citizen drop-off stations. In addition to that, we have the call center, and we have the enforcement folks that are dedicated just to solid waste, and some of those indirect costs just to residential. And then things start to get a little interesting or more complex when you look at everything else we do. So we have the landfill, we own the landfill. The landfill use has changed over time, I'll go over that. Illegal dump, it's gotta be collected, it's gotta be investigated, and those have been assigned to the solid waste fund, along with litter abatement and like street cans. So all the street cans downtown and all over the city where pedestrians can deposit litter, all of those are collected by our contractor and paid for out of the solid waste fund. Here's some fun facts. I'm not gonna go through all of them. The two big ones are 29 million annual service collections. That's a lot. So you think about the few calls that you and your council aides get because we missed somebody's can. That's a few that we missed out of 29 million annual service attempts. And what a service attempt is, a lot of people have three things they put out every week. They have garbage, recycling, and yard waste. So that counts as 3 service attempts. When you average that with bulk over the course of a year, it's about 29 million annual attempts. And then one of the big ones, one of the ones that has been trending up because there's more litter, but also trending up because we're picking up more litter, is we're at 1.7 million pounds of litter collected annually. So when we look at cost and revenue drivers, you know, as Valerie mentioned, we haven't raised the residential rates since 2006. Since that time, our population's grown by 35%. Carts and service has gone up 51%. Inflation's up 49%. There's been big changes in the global markets. And then, of course, these other services that are now in the fund and competing for funding each year. We've been able to go since 2006 because we haven't increased a lot of service. We've put off some of the things that are in the solid waste plan. We have found ways to be more creative in how we do our job. Presbyterian night shelter, using the homeless to help pick up litter, and now helping with mowing and things like that, has resulted in this relationship where they also now help us with homeless litter and homeless dumping in that whole area around the shelters. We're not paying them to do that. We're just helping them carry the waste off. So there's lots of things that we do to keep our costs down. We've had 2 very good contract terms with both Waste Management and with Republic, who does our MRF, and those have also saved us money to help us not have to do rate increases. There's a lot on this slide. You know, I kind of have more on this slide to kind of re-explain some of the things that we talked about. And I think this one does a really good job where the top table shows our primary service and then the bottom shows the secondary services. And most important is that service focus there on the bottom slide where the top services are residential. So clearly if a resident pays a fee and we provide that service, that's tagged to their fee, and it's something that you see in almost every city in America that has solid waste services the way we do it. Here's the service we provide, here's the fee we charge, it covers that service, next conversation. What we've added, and this happens at every city in America, is we've had all these other services where there are other potential solutions. So when you look at street sweeping, happens primarily in commercial and environmental areas. You can have it in the solid waste fund. I think Austin or one of the other cities, at least at one point, had it in their fund. But that's really something that we do to protect our rivers, right? All that ends up in a storm sewer and it washes out into a river. So you could also charge that to the solid waste fund. So there's all of these different options and things that we need to look at as part of having a strategic goal. The landfill, just real quick, this is not costs, this is consumption. So this is, you go back to 2009, that the blue part of the pie there, that was the residential waste that came from our curbs, residential curbs, and it was the major contributor to the landfill. In 2009, we had about a 50-year life at the landfill. 50 years is a long time. But there was also a agreement that the city entered into with Republic, who operates our landfill for us, where they were not getting a return on their investment. And as a result of an amendment to the agreement, more commercial waste has come into our landfill. And so now it is flip-flopped, where the majority of waste that is consuming the life of our landfill is on the commercial side, and the least of the waste that's going into the landfill is from our residential customers. So when we talk about like recycling from our residential customers. In 2009, the better they recycled, right, the less we consumed. But in 2021, that has less of an impact on the consumption when you have so much commercial waste going in. And that's one of the reasons why we've developed some commercial programs working with major businesses and industries to try to reduce the amount of waste coming out their gate. So we started out the budget. This is this year's budget. As we were developing the budget for this year, we had some improvement packages that we talked about, and what we elected to do was to put off the conversation till now to see what would happen with our contract negotiation with Waste Management and other things that we anticipated were changing in the economy. So we started out with about a $4.3 million shortfall. And as a result of things that have changed, not requiring any type of fee increase, our residential revenue is up $208,000, that's growth. We were a little bit conservative on that, and that's why that is up. Increased landfill volume, the variable rent, this is what our contractor pays us, is up. It's good because it's more money. It's bad because it's more consumption of the landfill. Recycling revenues, probably the most volatile thing that we have in the fund is recycling. That when we're making $4.5 million a year, right, we're not talking about things like this. We don't have a shortfall. But with the global economy, the things that happened in China a few years ago, we saw it tank, and we were spending $1 million a year. And then with supply chain issues and businesses now trying to find raw material, it's become more focused on using recycled material. So they're consuming more of the recycled material, which has driven the prices up. So where we were spending $1 million a year, we're not doing that anymore. We were spending about 1.2. So we saved that money, and then we're making another 1.2, round that up, making about $2.5 million a year, where we used to be $1 million in the hole. There isn't anybody in the industry that thinks that this is gonna last, but we don't know how long it's gonna last. This is good, but I wouldn't count on this money in the next 2 to 3 years. The other is our contract with Waste Management. We got them to forego a year of a rate increase, CPI adjustment. That will result in significant savings. So as I speak to you today, through osmosis, if nothing else, we were 4.2 million in the hole, and now we are 1.2 million to the good. That's great news, right? But it's not great enough. So we need to find other ways to raise rates. And one of the reasons why is, remember, Waste Management said we won't do a CPI adjustment, which was about 2.1 million. If you look at inflation, we anticipate that next year when they do get their rate increase, it'll be 2.5. So for 1.2 to the good right now, but we know we're facing at least 2.5 next year, we're already in the red again. So we have to find a way to make the fund good this year so that we're ready to make the expenditures next year. So we're looking at a number of things. One is residential bulk non-compliance. This would, essentially you get charged if you put out bulk illegally. If we have to clean it up, it would go up about $10 for each person that puts it out illegally. It doesn't go up a lot, or $10 at least for each 5 cubic yards. It would raise about $500,000. And again, this isn't on every single residential customer. This is just on those that are violating the ordinance. This hasn't been touched since 2006. We've made it pretty affordable for people just to put their junk out there on non-bulk weeks and have us haul it off. Sometimes that's cheaper than if they went with a private contractor. So we just want to bring that up to current rates. Commercial cart increase, this is where you have the strip malls where they have roll carts instead of dumpsters, that we would increase the cart charges on them. And then last year, council approved a landfill surcharge of $5. It doesn't impact our residential waste. Our residential waste goes across the scale without paying the $5 fee. But anybody who was not a grant of privilege holder since last year has had to pay an extra $5 a ton environmental fee. The grant of privilege are people that, or the haulers that drive across our roads. And the grant of privilege is some of that, half of it goes to Public Works to pay for road repair, and then the other half comes over to the Solid Waste Fund to pay for some of these commercial things like street sweeping and litter abatement and illegal dumping and things like that. We are proposing that on April 1st, that we would include grant of privilege haulers as part of that $5 fee. So every ton that goes across our scale, except for our own residential waste, will get charged that $5 fee. Doing it mid-year gets us about $900,000. I don't think, there will be some haulers that will act surprised, but I will tell you in conversations with both the landfill and haulers last year, everybody understood that if we didn't get the revenue from the non-GOP haulers that we needed to make the fund whole, that we'd be coming back and doing this. So I think this one's pretty straightforward. If we do these things on April 1st, we would see then a positive cash flow at the end of year, about 2.8. And that gets us in a more sustainable role or preparation for the upcoming fiscal year. One of the questions that comes up is, well, if we raise it by $5 for everybody, that's another $5 a ton. So what do we charge at our landfill? And the rates are set by Republic, who runs the landfill, compared to other landfills in the area. So even if we added $5 to our bottom, we're the very bottom one, the very cheapest one. If we added $5, it'd be $51, and we're still the cheapest one. The one right above it, the IESI C&D landfill, that's just for construction and demolition debris. But even so, if we raise our rate, I'm pretty certain they're gonna raise their rate also. Now, I'm going to leave the slide up just for a second because part of our recommendation is going to be not only do we do this 5 years mid-year now, but we're going to recommend that on October 1st, we go to $7.50 a ton. And then on April 1st of 2023, we go all the way to $10 a ton. So if you look at this chart right here and you add $10 to 46, that makes it 56, we're still the cheapest game in town. One of the reasons why we would recommend stair-stepping it as opposed to going to $10 right away is that the companies will need time to change their billing mechanism on their customers and to prep their customers, and the landfill will need to make adjustments also on the amount of waste coming across the scale and what they charge. So based on all of those assumptions, based on going to a $5 surcharge, the bulk, and the commercial carts, this is the first column there, fiscal year 2022, we would end up at about $2.8 million to the good. Then if council this next year in the budget process for 23 takes it to $7.50 on October 1st and then to $10 on April 1st of 2023, that we would end the year then about 2.5 million to the good, right? But what I'll call your attention to is the very last line on there is the estimated non-city tons to the landfill. So at $5 charging everybody, it doesn't change. Going to $7.50 and then to $10, it doesn't change, it's continuing to go up. What we do anticipate is into 2024, when we've got that full $10 fee in play, not only will the fund be more financially stable, but the number of tons going across the gate will drop down to about where we are this year, and then we believe that over time it will start to creep up. One of the things that we're facing in North Texas is everybody's landfill is filling up at the same time. Where we had 50 years in 2009, we have about 15 years left on the books now. Everybody's having to do landfill studies. Everybody's having to decide where their trash is going to go. So we think that there'll be a drop, but then when people realize, when the contractors realize how far they have to drive, maybe to another landfill with a more competitive rate, and you add up time and fuel and everything else, they'll be back to bringing it across our scales. So what this chart shows is this is our cash and cash equivalent. If you go back to, you can see in 2014, on the left side there that we've been in this downward trend. There's a number of reasons for that. One is we were losing a lot of our recycle revenue that we used to get. So remember, recycling revenue, when it was positive, it would go into the fund. And then when we're operating at a loss, we would take some of that money out of the fund. And we did that with a number of different services that started to cost more money. So we did that for a period of time, but we're really at a point in time now where we have to do these fee increases to make the fund solvent. So the red line, what that shows is over the next 3 years, what we'd anticipate these fees alone would do to the fund. It moves us back up towards the reserve requirement. The reserve requirement is something that we set. It's set by the city. It's not mandated by any organization, but it's good to have that reserve in play. So we do know that even though this will get us down the road to 2024 into 2025, we know that we're going to have to come up with other funding strategies over the next few years. So one of the questions you may ask is, when we do this, what is our outreach going to be to the haulers? We know who the haulers are, particularly the grantor privilege, because they're already paying us money. And we will reach out to them. We'll have conversations with them. We'll explain to them the who, what, when, where, and why. And then we'll also reach out to our commercial cart customers. Again, we know who they are because they're paying us for their commercial carts. Those rates have not been increased through 2006, so I would imagine that there's not going to be a lot of pushback on that. And when you compare even our price increase to how much someone would pay for dumpster service, it's still pretty affordable. Our outreach to our residential customers, I think this is an opportunity to also re-educate people on bulk and why they shouldn't put it out on a non-bulk week. And then also let them know, if they do, how much that they're going to have to pay us when that happens. And then, of course, we want to work with our business community leaders, the different chambers of commerce and others. We'll have meetings in person, by Zoom, so forth and so on. I think most of this will be solid waste driven, and it's not really unexpected, I don't think, on for most of them. Nobody's going to like to pay the higher rate. We know that, but we have a fund that needs to raise rates. We can't continue down this road of putting rates off. So there's some good news about the time when we start heading back towards the red. We believe that we'll have a landfill gas revenue in play that will bring in about $500,000 a year. We're working out the final pieces of the agreement with Republic. We think we can get into this with no money down into capital and then do a revenue split with them 50-50. So that's good. The other is strategic residential rate increase. And this is strategic in the sense that, you remember, if we move some of those services, like street sweeping, if we move it from the solid waste fund to the environmental fund, then you're going to have to raise rates in the environmental fund to pay for that street sweeping service. And both of those funds, when you do a price increase, end up on the water bill. So we're going to be making some strategic recommendations to you on what should move, when it should move, how it should move, and then how we would impose those fees. What is the best way to do that? The other is, we still have a couple of contracts that we need to negotiate. One is our material recycling facility, the MRF. This is the place where recyclables go and they get recycled. That is a big chunk of money in our budget. We don't want to recommend a residential rate increase to you today based on what we think we're going to get. We'd rather finish that MRF negotiate or the RFP negotiation, find out what that rate is, and then bring you back a rate that would pay for this over the next 5 to 10 years. That's a much better strategy. So our recommendations to move forward, we're recommending we do the mid-year fee increases as outlined earlier. We want to begin the public education and outreach right away, even though we would come back to you on March the 8th. You know, we want to give the haulers and the landfill as much time as we possibly can to prepare for this. And then develop and implement the landfill gas agreement. Y'all should be seeing something pretty soon on this. And then continue to develop ways to improve the financial health of the fund. We'll continue to work with our consultant, with North Texas Council of Governments, particularly on the landfill side. We're trying to come up with regional strategies. It's hard to site a new landfill, but everybody's gonna need either one or a super landfill, maybe better, to do things together and collectively. So, and that completes this update on the very interesting topic of solid waste.
Thank you, Brandon. Great job. Who has questions? You gonna take it offline? Okay. Environmental scientist.
Yeah, I need to do this all the time because y'all are tired and wore out, right? Make me the very end.
No, you did a great job. No questions? Okay.
Okay, thank
Brandon.
you.
Appreciate you. Okay, council, we're gonna go to the briefing about registration of community organizations. Council, right now, our plan is to adjourn the work session and then come back to continue our special meeting on redistricting. That's what we talked about earlier. I'm just throwing that out there, letting you know.
I was sure I was going to get bumped,
You hung
but
in
I'm
there.
glad I didn't.
You're efficient. I bet you can do this efficiently. Yes.
I will go through it as quickly as possible. Thank you for the opportunity to talk about the community organizations and our registration process that we have in place. But first, I'd like to start out by introducing the new manager for the Community Engagement Office, Amethyst Sloan. Although she's new to community engagement, she has been with the city for 7 years. She was originally with the Performance Office and then the Water Department. So we're excited to have her in community engagement.
Looking forward to working with all of you.
Yeah, thank you.
So what does community engagement do? Well, we help communities organize. That's neighborhood associations, HOAs, and alliances, and I'm going to be covering a lot of that support during today's presentation. But some of the other things we do is we provide free training and presentations for neighborhoods, civic groups, and schools. And we work with our departments very closely to help share their information with these different groups. We share information on city services, neighborhood events, public meetings, and we also provide meeting reports to council and departments for all the meetings that we attend. So the City of Fort Worth has a registration process, and it's offered to various types of organizations. It's voluntary for all organizations, and there are minimum requirements based on the type of the organization, and that's what I'm going to cover today. So why should an organization register with the city? Well, if they register with the city, we include them in our database, and they receive the weekly community engagement bulletin, which has information that we pull from city news that we think is important for neighborhoods and other organizations. They are included in the neighborhood organization map, and they receive early courtesy notification on zoning cases. We also provide them support and training at no cost. City departments use the database for their outreach and information, so it's important, especially like when we have a zoning case and the developer wants to reach out to the neighborhoods, this is where the information is that they receive. So why do we have a registration process? I would say the primary reason, we have a lot of things listed, the outreach and the engagement, but I think ultimately it's to make sure that we're maintaining an updated database of the contacts. So by us having a registration process and having annual updates that we request from the organizations, we make sure that we have the most up-to-date information in the database. It also allows us to provide these advanced notifications and again, to share weekly information and assist neighborhoods with capacity building and any needs that they might have. So the types of organizations who register with the city. We have voluntary neighborhood associations, HOAs, neighborhood alliances, redevelopment organizations, business associations, crime prevention, and faith-based organizations. And I'm going to briefly go over all of these. So voluntary neighborhood association, we work with new associations who want to establish an association in an area that's not currently served. We help them publicize the meeting, we help them establish boundaries, select the interim officers, we help them with their election if they ask for help, and we help them adopt bylaws. For all associations, the voluntary neighborhood associations, they must hold at least one meeting per year with advance notification. They have to complete an annual update and submit it to community engagement, and they must elect officers every 2 years. So what is an annual update? It's a very simple form. It's online, and we also have paper available. It just provides basic information. We link it to the database, which is only available to city staff and you and your district director. It's not something that's publicly available. And we do ask each organization to provide a public contact, and that's somebody who volunteers to have their information made public and linked to that association. So it's a very simple form. Another group that we have registration processes in place for are HOAs, which we refer to as mandatory neighborhood associations. So it's similar. They have to provide a copy of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions to the office. They have a development contract for the association. Again, defined boundaries, bylaws. They have to hold at least one general meeting a year. They have to have election procedures included in their bylaws, and then they have to provide the annual update to the Community Engagement Office. Another group is our neighborhood alliances. So this is groups of associations that have chosen to band together to form an alliance. They have bylaws that they adopt, and they provide those to our office. They also have defined boundaries, and they have to have a list of the associations that are included in the alliance. One thing that we've updated that we do now that we didn't used to do is alliances used to be able to just say, these are all the associations that belong to our alliance. And there was no double checking to make sure that those organizations actually knew they were a part of the alliance. And so we do that checking now to make sure that the alliance is telling us who the associations are that belong, but we're also doing that double check to make sure that the associations want to belong to that alliance and be considered with that group. And they also complete an annual update and submit it to the Community Engagement Office. A redevelopment organization, this is defined as an organization with community-based leadership that's formed to revitalize communities. And typically, the group works on key development projects or community planning, conservation. It's a very large umbrella for a lot of very different types of organizations. Again, these are the things that they have to do each year to remain registered. And I know just within my neighborhood, like to tell you some of the variety of the organizations, like we have the Friends of Oakhurst Park. That's considered a redevelopment organization, very narrow focus. They take care of the park. But we also have the United Riverside Rebuilding Corporation, which is a more economic development organization. We currently have 27 redevelopment and business organizations registered with the city. I meant to include, we have 11 alliances that are registered, 140 HOAs that are currently registered, and 137 voluntary neighborhood associations. Crime prevention organizations, this is something that is fairly new. We had some Citizens on Patrol Code Blue organizations that wanted to register. So this is another category, and it allows us to interact with additional people that are in the neighborhoods that there's some crossover where members belong to both that and the neighborhood association, but then there are some that are just members of the crime prevention organization. So it's another way to get information out to the community. We currently have 5 registered, but we're going to be doing an outreach to try and increase that number. And finally, our faith-based organizations. All that we ask from them is that they provide an annual update to community engagement. And again, that's just to make sure we have the most current contact for the organization. We currently have 285 registered faith-based organizations, and we are working to expand that. Many we added during COVID because they were instrumental in helping us get information out to the community. We also keep a list of community organizations. This is a list that was put together during the Race and Culture Task Force, then with Census and COVID. So we've just kept adding to it as we looked for opportunities to provide more partnership with community organizations who can reach some of our underserved communities. And so that's a database. There's nothing that's required from them. We just have the contact information and we send them information that's pertinent to their neighborhoods. Another program that we started in the past couple of years is called Re-Engage. And it's a program designed to help those struggling organizations who maybe are having difficulty getting members or volunteers. Maybe they have some difficulty getting people to run for office. The assistance that we provide is based on the needs of the organization. It can include training and outreach. And so far, since we started the program, we have helped 18 organizations re-engage and reorganize. So what happens if someone is non-compliant with our registration policies? We try to work with the organization to resolve any issues that are standing in their way. Does it require extra training or perhaps helping them do outreach in the neighborhood? The non-compliance can include they don't complete their annual update, they're not holding a meeting, they're not holding elections. And I know some of you are very familiar with some of these issues that happen in our neighborhoods. If it can't be resolved, then a letter is sent telling them they're non-compliant, and then ultimately it can lead to them being unregistered. Unregistering, I want to emphasize this, is always a last resort. It's something that we never want to do, but we also want to make sure that we're having the most current information available in the database, and sometimes unregistering an organization is required. So if a group is no longer registered with the city, they won't be included in the database. We do leave their boundaries in the map, but it's inactive and it's not public facing. They would not receive the early notifications for zoning cases. And they can re-register at any time. And like I said, through the Re-Engage program, that's kind of our goal, is to never have to unregister anybody, to just find ways to help them become more active. During COVID, there was a lot of and that still extends to today, there's a lot of flexibility with unregistering organizations because of meetings and annual updates. We recognize that a lot of organizations were not able to meet, they were not comfortable having gatherings, and therefore it was difficult to have their organizations continue the way they had before. So now we're reaching out to those who haven't updated their information to see what assistance they can get from our office. We also, during COVID, one thing that we did, we provide virtual meeting training and facilitation for neighborhood associations who maybe weren't comfortable with technology. Community engagement staff actually, in some cases, trained the neighborhood staff to learn how to use virtual meeting software, and in other cases, they actually facilitated the meetings for the organization so that they could continue meeting virtually. And we continue to offer that assistance if they need it. So these are just some other things, some other services provided by community engagement. The training and workshops. We do, as I said, the meeting reports that you all receive after we attend a neighborhood meeting. We have our annual awards program, which was held last Saturday, which was a way of recognizing all of the work that our neighborhoods do in the community over the past couple of years. Again, we help with the advance notifications for zoning. We provide support for the public meetings. We have started a series of worst sharing stories, which is highlighting neighborhood projects in our city news and in our community engaged bulletin. We also help to verify membership for boards and commissions, because sometimes people will say they're speaking for an organization, and so we can help verify that. And we also have the volunteer management for the city located in the Community Engagement Office. So right now, we're looking at our registration policy to see if there are some issues that need to be clarified. We're also looking to update our database tool and confirm all the data. As we're going through and finding people who have not submitted their paperwork, we're trying to identify those. But we also had the interns in the mayor and council office who have helped us by actually reaching out and making phone calls. And we started with District 5 as our test to update that information. So when we get the database tool, it will be a wonderful opportunity to make sure that all of the information is up to date as we launch the new program. We continue to identify and work with groups who need assistance. And Amethyst and I are going to be meeting with each of the district directors to discuss ways that community engagement can help in your particular districts. Are there any questions?
Council, go ahead, Gina.
Good report, Michelle. Thank you so much. I don't have a whole bunch of questions or complaints or anything because I know things are kind of in flux and being reformulated, but I got a trick question for you. How do you update a file submitted by a person who is now deceased? Because they're not going to email you, and chances are other people are dead too. I was looking at our database just a few hours ago, and there are about at least 5 to 6 leaders who are no longer with us.
Okay.
So what do you do?
If the current contact, like if we send things and we don't get a response from that contact, we'll usually reach out to the council office and see if you have any additional information about that. Or if they happen to be in an alliance, we can reach out to the alliance and see if they have any more up-to-date information. And one thing I want to point out, when we're working through this process, whether it's an organization that needs some extra help, like we're going through, we have an HOA in your district that we're trying to provide some extra support to because they're in a very difficult situation. But when we're offering the assistance or when we see problems, we're keeping the council up to date on that because we want to make sure that whatever we're doing with that organization, you're aware of and that you support the work that we're doing with them.
And I want to commend you for work you've done last year to identify alliances that really were not representing neighborhood associations they claim to be. And so that's something that you always want to be abreast of, but thank you for addressing that. And I suspect we may have some more of that going on today, but thank you for taking care of it in the past.
Thank you.
Else? Any other questions, council? Nope. Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate you. And then our last briefing is on the 2022 housing tax credit application for the gala at Ridgemar. Ayla Gala Gula.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. If I could use a baseball analogy, I know it's the bottom of the ninth, 2 outs, and I'm the last batter. And whatever you do, ground out, pop up, whatever, don't extend this inning. So I understand. So as you all know, we go through this process every year. This year we only had, 2 applications. One withdrew, residents on Hemp Hill, so we're left with the gala at Ridgemar. This is the process. It starts with TDACA. They issue a qualified allocation plan each year, which guides the tax credit process. From that, we go to local resolutions of support, which is the stage we're at right now. And from that, the developers submit their application to TDACA. They do further underwriting. They announce the awards in July. This is some projects that we've recently, tax credit projects we recently had in Fort Worth. You can see by year the number of projects that have been approved by TDACA, and then to the right are some recent developments. What does QAP say about city affordable housing policies? They have to notify the governing body. If we give them a resolution of support, they can get 17 points, and if we add development funding, they can get an additional point. Neighborhood and associations and local officials must be notified and must comply with fair housing. Our policy, we ask that it be a mixed income development. We use 70% of area median income or above as our market rate units, and then at least 10% have to be 0 to 30. And then if the project is located in a high opportunity area, you get max support. We provide assistance in the partial waiver of development fees up to $2,500. The notification requirements, this particular development met all the criteria that's listed there on the left, and they had the one information session. This is the project. It's located just north of 35 near Ridgemar Mall. There are some other developments nearby, but it appears to be a very good location for this type of development. It's a senior development, 91 units with 10 market rate units. Council District 3. And our next steps, this is timeline. We met with the Neighborhood Quality and Revitalization Committee last week, and then we're briefing you today. Next week it'll be on the agenda, and then the deadline for their submission is in March, and then TDACA release some projects later and make final awards in July. Questions?
Any questions? Michael, you're good. Awesome. You're good, Victor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, council, to request for future agenda items or reports. Go ahead, Gina.
I have 3 specific future agenda items. I think they all might involve police. One, I'd like a report, some type of investigation into how we handle pop-up entertainment businesses. I have one that continues to have these pop-up parties at 2941 Precinct Line Road, and this is not to disrupt a business from thriving, but when it imposes upon the character and quality of life of a residential community, in this case, Lakes of River Trails, something has to be done. And I understand that we have talked about a cease and desist order for this, but this is a pop-up business at 2941, and they have these parties that include the sale of alcohol. That's one. The other, I'd like to follow up on something that came up during the chief's dialogue that we had. I do want to know the correlation between the proliferation of guns and the removal of right to carry. I think there's a connection there. And so that's something for PD and legal to take a look at for us. And the final one, let's see. Oh, no. This is, you're going to mention the task. Okay, I wanted to follow up. Too often, we learn about real good initiatives that police are coming up with, but we learn about it like the average citizen does. There's much to be gained with us in crime if we're able to work together. And so I'd like for the ACM in charge of PD or the city manager to talk about how can we work together with police. And the idea that Councilman Nettles had for a task force, I think, is very important because every council district is different. And so how can we get this task force so that we work with police and work together, because nobody really has ownership of any good ideas, but we certainly can be made better if we are working together. And I heard that from Councilman Nettles and Councilwoman Beck, and that I want to formalize that.
Anybody else? Jared?
I have one, and I support all of what Mayor Pro Tem just said as well. I want to follow up on the IR that Chief Davis gave today with a full report, and bear with me, I'm going to read something so that I'm clear. I love and maybe this is a shared presentation between the chief, human resources, and maybe risk management, and maybe plan and data analytics, but I want Chief in this presentation to share details on cancer mitigation strategies in place, cover or address the concern with PFAS, options being considered to address minimizing PFAS exposure in turnout gear. And I would add maybe also in our foam as well for our chemical fires. And then share emerging trends, concerns that need to be on our radars. And then I think maybe the reason I brought up Mark McAvoy is I think that they may be helpful with the financial piece of the discussion, however that fits in the presentation. So that's my one for today, in addition to the follow-up that the team presented on crime prevention.
Thank you. Council, anybody else? Chris? No? Everybody else is good? I might ask staff to explore the option on the task force of how the Crime Control Prevention District Board should be utilized, since we are sitting on that board. So maybe rather than another task force, we really use some time on CCPD to get that done. That might be the more efficient way to do it. So there's just that. Carrie.
As a business guy, pro-business, but also want to follow city regulations, just an idea on when code enforcement can close a business. One of my bars in Fort Worth, it's open 365 days a year for the last 10 years and was closed by code because the neighboring tenant's sink backed up. And this, we stay open on Thanksgiving, Christmas, July 4th, every day of the year. It was just, it's an overreach of code. And it was during a peak hour for the business. We've taken the necessary precautions to have different permits for the bar and the kitchen. Just need to keep in mind that, you know, because it happened to me, I was able to make the changes to get it corrected. But it's not fair that if it was just a regular business owner that they would not have the same access. They would have that barrier to prevent them from getting their business back open. And just need to be more cautious when code is out there dealing with business owners.
I forgot one thing, charges to my head, not my heart. I don't know, and Carrie, please help me on this. With the development services, we talked with the audit committee about doing an audit report on the timing of the process. There's another piece of that, and I don't know if DJ and his team is ready, but I do want to put it out in the universe so that we can work towards that. For them to do a study on the practices internally that are needed to make that process more efficient. And I know that we have different parts of the development process in different departments. And out of that conversation came up a brilliant idea of bringing in consultants who are experts in development services to help us think about how we streamline that process. So,
And I think I mentioned that last work
Right.
sessions. I think they're working on a plan on how that should look and what the sequence would be. Yeah,
Okay, cool.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
You and I are on
Thank
the
you.
same page on that, for
Cool.
sure.
I did have one when Carrie talked about closing. I have some motels and hotels that we have been doing some nuisance abatements on those and closed them. And I had asked city, how can we get in a position to purchase those properties to revitalize them for the future? Because basically we close them and then another hotel or motel reapplies and opens back up. And I want to figure out how we can channel that, if possible.
Perfect. Anybody else? No? Okay. Meeting adjourned. Okay.